We first have on our meeting a public hearing. That public hearing is to consider proposed general assistance ordinance appendices A through D effective October 1st, 2017 through September 30th, 2018. And I will open the public hearing and then ask if there is anybody who wishes to speak in favor of adopting these ordinances, then against, and then neither for nor against. So, does anybody wish to speak in favor of adopting these general assistance ordinances? Seeing none, does anybody wish to comment in opposition to these ordinances? Again, seeing none, does anybody wish to comment neither for nor against? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is to approve some minutes, and we have 4 sets of minutes in our packet for approval. The first is for the executive session on Tuesday, December 5th, and I will await a motion on those.
I move to accept the minutes of the Tuesday, December 5th executive session.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion, any additions, corrections? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? That passes. Next, we have Thursday, December 7th, which was the regular Select Board meeting for the month of December on an odd day. And we have those meetings before us, and I'll await a motion on those.
Quick question, which were the minutes that Linda had offered some amendments on prior to the 12th? Okay. Then I move to approve the meeting minutes of the Thursday, December 7th meeting, as written.
Ken, I have a procedural question. Since I recused myself for a good portion of that meeting, is it appropriate for me to vote on the minutes?
I think it is because.
That was part of, just wouldn't be sure.
Because there are votes that you took, you did
Yeah.
participate in parts of the meeting.
Yeah.
So it would be, the only issue would be if you then went in and tried to make changes to the parts that you recused yourself from, we probably wouldn't want to see that happen, but otherwise, I think it's fine. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion or any additions, corrections for the December 7th meeting? If not,
One spelling error, but that's all right.
well, yeah, I see one too, abstention.
Yeah.
That has an E, not an A. Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes as presented? Any opposed? No, okay. On to the meeting minutes for December 12th, which was a special library meeting. Await a motion on those minutes.
I move to approve the meeting minutes of December 12th as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve those as amended, and there were just a couple of corrections that I believe I sent to Linda on that. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. And finally, the meeting minutes from Monday, December 18th, which was another special library meeting. Await a motion on those.
Moved. Yep, go ahead.
Move to accept December 18th, 2017 special library meeting of the Select Board.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on that motion? Any additions, corrections to those minutes? If not, all in favor of approving them as presented? And any opposed? No, okay. Okay, that takes care of the minutes. Announcements, our next regular Select Board meeting will be on Monday, February 12th, 7 o'clock in this room. Upcoming workshops, we have one tentatively scheduled for Monday, January 22nd, a library design workshop. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the agenda on that item. And another one on Monday, February 5th. And on February 26th, a preliminary presentation of a concept plan. And those are all, will be talked about when we talk about the timeline and the schedule this evening. Some of those may be rescheduled, but I just wanted to get them on there. And I also put the first budget workshop on just to get everybody revved up for the budget season on Thursday, March 1st, 5:30, and that will be here. And I believe, as is common practice with those budget sessions, that there will be a light meal served for the staff members and board members who will be here. Further announcements, the town office will be closed from 8 a.m. through noon on Thursday, January 11th. That's this coming Thursday, so employees can complete required annual safety training. Very important. So if you have town office business, don't go in the morning on Thursday. And also on Monday, January 15th, a week from today, the town office will be closed in observance of Martin Luther King Day. Committee openings are shown on the agenda. If you have interest in serving on a committee, we encourage you to come to the town office and fill out the appropriate form, and we will be happy to consider it. Okay, do we have some agenda changes this evening?
I would hope the board would entertain moving agenda item B under new business, receive report from the town auditor to before the town manager's report so that the guests can get home in a timely manner.
Makes sense to me. Does anybody have any objection to that? No? Okay, we'll do that. Any further agenda changes?
I would like to request that under new business, item E, committee applications, that we table the 2 applications for the Opera House Committee, Monica Kelly and Linda Greenlaw, simply because of transitions that are going on with that committee right now that we need a little time to iron out.
Okay, yeah, from what I understand, the committee is entertaining the possibility of making a request to change its size.
It is, the chair has recently resigned, we don't have a chair for the committee, and there are some things that we should just consider before we take on those appointments.
Okay. And I would add that I spoke to both of the appointees for this and let them know that this was a possible action tonight, and they both concurred and thought it was good. So without objection, we'll strike those 2 applications from our agenda tonight. Okay, any further agenda changes? If not, we will move then to public comment. Public comment should be directed at issues not under discussion on this evening's agenda. Comment from the public will be welcome prior to each agenda item. Further comment will be granted by permission from the board. All public comment should be brief and to the point. Do we have anybody who wishes to make public comment this evening? Nobody likes us. Okay, thank you very much. So now, as the agenda changes suggest, we will move on to receiving the report from the town auditor for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017. And I will give the podium to Megan and her esteemed guests.
So Ron Smith is here tonight from RHR Smith. I worked very closely with his colleague Bernice over a several-week period. We had a lot of things that had to be cleaned up from before, things that were not shown in our accounting software that were on our financial statements. So they helped me get all that cleaned up and onto our books. So now our books match our financial statements, which was almost a week and a half of them being here, was just getting that stuff cleaned up. They were fantastic to work with. Bernice helped me a lot in having better practices, helping me develop internal controls to prevent things such as fraud or areas where fraud could happen. So I'm very happy with the work that we accomplished this year, and I think it was one of our most productive years since I've been here. So I feel really great about where we stand right now.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Ron Smith. I'm the principal with RHR Smith & Company. Unfortunately, Vernice couldn't be here with the weather, but I'm certainly prepared to deliver a presentation and answer any and all questions that you guys may have, regarding the audit, the process, and kind of where we're at right now as the audit's in conclusion, and really trying to sit down and work with Megan to do some final steps, in the story, and really move into, some housekeeping, for the town. So what I've done is I've prepared about a 6-page presentation to take the highlights, out of this document, and certainly have a conversation with you, and certainly talk about some best practice issues and some things that were talking points during the audit, and again, answer any questions that you all have. So, next slide. So here, you're gonna have a hard time seeing this, but here is basically, I think, one of the most important stories in your audit. And it's really what you own, what you owe, and basically at the end of the year, what you have left over. And you can certainly see the assets of what you own, the liabilities of what you owe, and the fund balances, with the graphs right there. They really tell a story, and I think that the important story that they tell is with your fund balance. You have a charter provision that I believe is 12 to 15%, where of your operating budget you will keep in surplus 12 to 15%. Last year, you were actually below that at about $2.1 million in 2016. And as you can see on that graph this year, your fund balance actually went up to a little over $2.6 million, or raised about $500,000 from the year before at 17%. And certainly that's above what your charter says. So I think that the question is now is there a charter provision that says, what do you do with the extra? And I think that that's one of the talking points that we have. And at the end, we've got a few of them. But one of the ones that I think that we, would certainly recommend you to do is to go back and revisit your charter, and certainly look at your fund balance policy, and see if it makes sense for Rockport today as opposed to when that actual provision was put in there. Because you may have outgrown it. There's a lot of things that have gone on now. I don't know if TIFs were certainly, back then, and wastewater. You have a fund balance policy, but you don't have a wastewater fund balance policy. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So it might be time now to go back and revisit that policy. You're at 17%. That's average. That's where you want to be. Industry standards say that you should be anywhere from 30, 60 to 90% of your operating budget. You're at 17%, so 16% would be 60 days. You're right there. So to be at 90 days, we actually err on that higher side for a variety of reasons. You're an oceanfront community, and you are running a wastewater department on an oceanfront community. And I think when that phone rings, it can be a very expensive phone call. And certainly we do many oceanfront communities in the state of Maine, and it's not cheap to run a wastewater department. And one of the things that we'll talk about here in a few minutes is your wastewater department, because I know you just went through a rate increase, within the past year-ish or two. And I'd argue probably in 2017, you really need to look at those rate increases again, just to see how that, see how your sewer and its operations are working out, because you're still lean in your sewer department. You've got about a $900,000 to $1 million operating budget over there, and you've got about $90,000 of reserves, 30 days. And that's not a lot of money, to be running a wastewater department. The good news is that you had some foresight to set some money away into a capital reserve account for your sewer, and I think that that's probably about $400,000. So there's the good news, and I'd argue that you could probably de-obligate that money, if that phone call rang and you needed to put your hands on money. But that's, again, that money is there for a reason. You've had some foresight, to put some money away. And I think that if there's one piece of advice that I would give the town besides some best practice, I'd look into your wastewater operations, certainly with its operations and whether or not the rates are enough to support the operations of it and the future expansion and capital reserve needs of your department. And I think that that's something with your rate increase being in place for over a year now. I think 2018 would be a good time to look at that, just to see, really the whether or not that's supporting, the operations and the level of what you should be funding some type of reserve fund. So I don't see it. I don't see it as of 17. And I think that, I think that in 18, again, that's an area that I'd pay some attention to if I was this town, sitting in those chairs. So your operational fund balance is right where it needs to be. It's average, but again, you have some other operations. I believe you have somewhere over, $1.2 million sitting in a variety of reserve accounts for wastewater, equipment, fire, building. There's many other reserve accounts, but I would say that I would grade your financial condition, and we do about 130 Maine communities, municipalities, at about a B. I'd give you about a B for a financial grade for the town of Rockport. You virtually are a debt-free town. You have very little debt, but I'm a little leery of your fund balance, and I'm a little leery about that, as compared to your operating budget because of wastewater. So I think that when you look at a municipality, you have to look at the whole story. And wastewater is part of who you are and is sufficient or supposed to be self-sufficient by the ratepayers. And I think that it is. But again, when that phone rings, all hands on deck. If you don't have enough money, that money's got to come from somewhere until you figure out a solution. So
when you talk about the wastewater, though, you realize the plant and everything's up in Camden,
Yep.
and we're just part of the
understand.
the system.
Yeah,
and
understand.
everything. Okay.
Completely understand. And, but being a part of that, and have an operational budget of what you're paying for a piece of that and some of your own, expenses as well, you've got a $900,000 budget at the end of the day. that's a big piece of who you are, and certainly your ratepayers are the ones that are footing that bill. And I think that that's what I would certainly pay some attention to going forward. 18, I think, is going to be a good start. I do.
I was surprised to learn how much even our pump stations, because we don't have the wastewater facility,
Yeah,
but
but you
even
got
those
pump stations
are
aren't cheap.
pretty high-ticket
Yep.
items.
They're not cheap.
The one we're replacing at Mace Sport right now is over 300,000.
Yeah. And you think about what Megan just said. You've got like a little shy of $400,000 sitting in that that's a pump station, you know, and it doesn't take long, you know, with wear and tear. And that's why I say oceanfront communities, you know, usually more expensive to take care and maintain of waste. So, next slide, Megan, I'm sorry. So, and there's a piece of who you are, you know, and really I think that tells a story of who you are. You know, when you look at the largest piece, you know, of where your money comes in, you know, a lot everybody says Maine, we've got spending problems. I don't think we have spending problems. I think we got revenue problems in our state. And clearly when you look at where your money's coming from, you've got one major means of support here, and that's the taxpayers on the town of Rockport. And that's what all the significance of that blue is, and that always tells a story, you know, there. You've diversified your town. You've got some TIFs. You run a busy community here in this town. You've got a lot of things going on, you know, but you can see as far as who supports these things, the lion's share is supported by the backs and owners of residential property tax owners in Rockport, Maine. And I think that that's one of the most important graphs we could show you, so that when something impacts who you are financially, there's the piece that pays for it right there. So.
Can I ask a quick question? Not to go into that makes sense to me. From your experience, though, that's not a strikingly different graph than you would see in a lot of other
So
municipalities.
it's getting to be now, and where you see the striking difference is people that are really doing economic development, really pushing TIFs.
Their little pieces are getting bigger.
Their little pieces I'd argue those little pieces start to represent half, you know, what the collections are, depending on if you're in an industrial community. You know, if you went into an industrial community that operated paper mills 10 or 15 years ago, that would have been more than half. It arguably could have been 3/4, you know, of your property tax base, the commercial base of that blue box. Well, guess what? Paper mills are becoming things of the past now, and I'd argue we probably do every paper mill community in the state of Maine. That there was a huge place, a huge time, but just because of technology, industry, the cost of paper being manufactured outside this country now, it's put a strain, you know, on the paper economy, and it's really put a strain on the Maine economy, you know, with that have paper things. And I think that when you look at that box, if you were in a industry-based, you know, community, you'd see a different, you know, box. TIFs, you know, wind power. You know, that's big. I'm not a fan of it. You know, I'll certainly be the first one to tell you. But certainly there are some communities where I would argue wind power represents, and the collections on wind power, 90%, you know, of that box right there is borne by the person with operating the wind power, not the community members, you know, of that municipality. So trying to diversify, I think, is the challenge, you know, to take those small boxes and make them bigger, you know, is your challenge. So
What's the light blue wedge?
I believe
the
that's
largest of the small ones.
intergovernmental revenues is a small blue wedge, and just bear with me. I thought it was excise tax and other intergovernmental revenues, and I'm going to say final answer it is. So
Yeah, okay, I see excise tax up there at 5.3.
Yeah.
That's the biggest of the small numbers,
Yeah.
but the
Investment
thing is in the
income-
wrong place.
Investment income is the smallest number.
yeah, and the good news is that you used some money to reduce for property tax relief in 2017. Your fund balance went up by $500,000, largely in part to favorable property tax collections, largely in part to a small bit of increase in excise tax collections, which are your two biggest of the shaded area in your revenue collections, and largely in the part that you're a frugal town. You always return expenses, you know, back to your bottom line. And between the roughly $200,000 of revenue projections over what you thought in budget and the expenditure increases, there's a $500,000 increase right there, and that's good news because you thought your fund balance was going to go down, you know, to start the year, and it actually went up, you know, because of the way the numbers ended up working with your more favorable revenue collections. And you're frugal, so you returned a lot of money. I'd argue over $300,000 of expenses got returned back to your bottom line too. Some reobligated for this year, you know, but many returned right back to reappropriate. So, next one. And there you go. You know, and I always say that this one tells a real story. Your largest piece of where your money goes, I'd argue you have very little control over there sitting as a 5-member board. Really, at the end of the day. You have very little to say, you know, but a huge investment certainly in your school system, you know. So that always to me is the next shocking graft, you know, that you look at there. And then I would say if you took all the other 6 areas or 7 areas of where you were spending your money in various town service departments, I'd argue that 90% of that service that you provide there are salary and benefits. And that really tells the story right there of what you have control, you know, over there. And I think that, you know, when your voice is heard, you know, on your school budget, you know, you've got school committee members, you know, that serve within your, with your school system. There's really something that I always try to encourage, you know, is that, you know, is to be very active and involved in that school budget. And I've gone to many town meetings, you know, where the school departments are part of the town. We'll spend 2 hours debating a town meeting, a town budget of $1 million, and we'll blow through a school budget in 5 minutes of $6 million, you know, and there's it's an area that really makes a difference, and I hope that you work closely with your school committee, so.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What's the difference between elementary instruction and education?
So elementary instruction is just a piece of, you know, that instruction. I think that Sharman just left it on there. What we would have done is recycled, you know, probably some other municipality. Elementary instruction is a piece of education.
Okay.
So I think that what she did is she probably went into your school budget. Elementary instruction was a big piece of your local school budget.
Yeah.
So she just left it on there. Next one.
Yeah, that gets us up to our 60%.
And here's your percentage. You know, really it's gone from, I know it's hard to see, you know, but it's gone, your unassigned fund balance, that 30, 60, 90-day benchmark are 8, 16, you know, and 24%, which is about 1.3 at 30 days, 2.6 at 60 days, and 3.9 at 90 days. You're at about 2.6, a little more than 2.6. You're at 17%, you know, of your operating budget, and I call that average, and I give you a B for a financial score. And that's a really important number when you go out for debt service. And what I would encourage you to do, as Megan did this year on a new fire truck, private issuances. I mean, you've got bond bank is a great tool and resource to use, you know. But sometimes you will find on the private market you get I've seen as much as 1 to 2 basis points of interest saved on private issuances. You've got a piece of bond, I think it's the highest one that you owe, you know, that's got like a rate of like 5.5%, 6%. And this bond you just got for your fire truck is like 3%, 3.5%. That's a lot of money when you amortize that, whether it's over 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. You know, private issuances, I'd argue anytime that you look after debt, please go explore a private market out there too, because that's what they're there for. And usually you're gonna save, you know, a lot of money, you know, on the private market.
So what would you recommend as a percentage for our unexpended fund balance? Because we've had some discussions about that, and I know Megan has told the board before that our charter provision isn't quite enough.
Yeah, so a percentage with debt or just a flat percentage?
No, just a flat percentage.
90 days. With your sewer department, I'll sit here and say final answer all the time, 90 days.
So
'cause you
90
run a
days, so
wastewater.
not a percentage of the
No,
budget.
so 24%, 90 days. I'm just equating 3
Okay.
12s, 24%, 25%, you know, of 90 days. You know, that's what I would use as a percentage.
Okay, so that's significantly higher than what we have right now then.
It is,
That
and that's
would
why I
get
say
us
it's
an
time
A.
it's time to revisit your policy.
Yeah, so what would get us an A?
What would give you an A?
24%.
90 days is going to be a big part of that A. You've got debt service. I'd argue that some of that's mitigated with your debts. You got very little debt, you know, here in this town. But I think so I'm gonna put a minus. I'll give you a -1 for the B in your average, and with the 60 days, a -1. I'll bring it up to a -0.5 of 1. You know, with the low debt that you have at this town. I'd bring it down to probably a 1.5 negative because of your wastewater department and really there. And I know you've got some reserves. I know you've got some money, socked away. I think we'd revisit some of your capital reserves, some of your special projects that you have there that are probably created by ordinance, charter, some provision here. I'd revisit some of that and then re-obligate it if it's outlived its useful life or purpose. But I'd argue because of your wastewater, I'd argue that that brings you back down to average, by a bond rating agency. Yep. They look at everything, and wastewater is a big thing that they will look at too, for sure. And then they start asking the questions. If they see wastewater, when's the last time you had a rate increase? When's the last time before that you had a rate increase? This is just a lot of questions that they'll ask as they rate you. And when you go out to get some significant money on the private market, you definitely want to go through a rating agency. So, yeah.
So are you saying that instead of having the 100 reserve funds that we have, individual reserve funds, that we just have one reserve fund but not have it broken down into all
I
these
think that
little
you've got
categories?
probably three reserve funds. Capital obviously is the biggest area that I see out there, but needs change. Clearly needs change. And I think what I see out there in the world, in the municipal and school world is because of those needs changing, there's almost like a contingency capital reserve account to give you the ability to re-obligate some of that money, but attach strings to it to re-obligate it to roads, re-obligate it to buildings, re-obligate it to whatever other infrastructure needs that you may have. And that's what I would say with the with the reserves, is that I think you can have three primary needs: roads, buildings, and and I'd argue infrastructure, sewer, wastewater.
I mean, we have reserve funds for a new motor for our.
Oh yeah, you got equipment too. I can go through. They're in the
new
document. There's
boat,
like
new
2
pilings.
2 pages of them.
Yeah.
I'd relook at some of those because chances are they may have got put there by either vote of this board or vote at some town meeting. So it's not like you can just take a pen and say, we want to re-obligate you. There's probably going to have some research done. And Megan and I, before the meeting, were talking about that. I'd say probably over the next year, I might want to put that on your to-do list.
But
is
why
to
is
look at
that
some of
wrong to do that?
Is that wrong to do that?
Why is it wrong to do that?
To have
Well,
like 30
to have
different.
a fund for a, new motor for the boat and
Yeah.
a new boat and a new
I'm not-
piling.
I'm not saying it's wrong, and there's probably a need, and I just don't know when that need was. But if somebody says, would you rather have the money for a new motor for the boat, or we just had 7 accidents, out on one of our town roads because there's a pothole out there or some blind side out there, we need to spend $200,000 in re-engineering that road, I'd probably argue that's going to be a bigger and more important endeavor, for this town. And that's what I'm saying. You were so specific, in what your money's for. But if that phone rings, and you have a different priority as this board, I'm not sure, you're going to have to do a lot of looking to re-obligate some of this money.
Well, we did go through the reserve funds within the last year or so, I think, Owen, when you were here, and we actually did eliminate some and reallocate some of those.
Whittling away
but-
at it.
Yep.
But we do use them as planning tools for the
Yep.
various pieces of infrastructure we need, whether it's a fire truck or a boat engine or
Yep.
some other pice of capital improvement.
I think it's necessary, and I think that you need to have that flexibility. What I'm saying is I'd have more than a science to it. I'd have more than arithmetic to it. I'd have a science to it. I'd have a plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, specific to roads, specific to infrastructure, specific to town infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure. That's the type of document that I'm talking about that really your policy doesn't address in your charter. So. Next one. And here's, I think I probably hit, every one, of your talking points. There was some issues with your certificate of assessment this year. There was some calculation areas. I believe that there was an article that failed at town meeting that got included in your certificate of assessment. And then going the other way, there were some articles that should have not been in there. And I think it was roughly about $250,000 of overassessment. To the town of Rockport because of some errors in your assessment. And that's one thing I always say, pay great attention to. It's really something you don't want to miss on, there. you know, because it can set you back 2 years, you know, and $250,000 for the town of Rockport, that's real money. That's real money. I'd argue that's 3 times the amount you have sitting in a sewer reserve operationally right now. So that's real money, just to put it into perspective what that means. And then there were some best practice issues that I want to talk about here, you know, under recommendations. But, any questions on the finance piece? You know, I'm here for you all, and I just want to talk about some best practice matters, you know, with you.
I had 2 questions. One is kind of on the wastewater topic. You had said that there's a small amount in our unassigned fund balance for wastewater,
Correct.
40,000 or so.
I think it's about 88, Owen.
Okay, 88. And then we have this reserve account that has 400.
I think you might have 2. You know, you got one that's got about 380-ish, and you got another one that think's got like 40-ish.
The one we just established for the Camden treatment plant.
Right.
So between those two, it's almost 400.
Yep.
And so the question is, it seems like good, prudent planning for that call, or we know Camden is going to be asking us for some money, 10% of whatever upgrades that they do in the future. Is there, from a financial aspect, is it smarter to keep it in the unassigned fund balance or to have these reserve accounts that we
I'd
do
have a plan. Whenever you can have a plan, you know, I think that plan needs to be precise and as accurate as you possibly can, given the information that you have. And I think that is something that's distinct from your operational plan. So what's that mean? You got 2 plans, operationally and then capital. Those are always your 2 biggest plans of government. And I would have them very distinct, you know, from each other.
Yeah, we do have a fairly robust capital improvement plan for wastewater, which
Yep.
is the reason that the fund is where it is, and we have taken that out, I think, at least 5 years, if not more.
Yeah. And that really helps mitigate, you know, a small operational fund balance, or what I would consider 30 days, a small operational fund balance in your wastewater. But you just heard it, 1 phone call, that's one pump station, you know, $300,000.
Hopefully it's still under warranty.
Yeah.
And then the other question that I had, if we could go back to the first slide, just before we get on to the recommendations. All the way to the right, well, almost all the way to the right, the interfund payables.
Yeah.
Why was there such a spike there from 16 to 17?
You got a huge pooled group of money here in this town. It could be TIF related. I don't think it's library related though, correct?
It just kind of stands out as the only
Yeah.
spot where
So-
there's a really distinct spike there.
That's going to come up to, it's a great question. It's going to come up as one of our next
Okay.
target points in the
Cool.
discussion. So, yeah, you are stealing my thunder there, Owen, but
I
it's
was
good.
just teeing you up.
I'm on cue right now because it's about to come up in this next part of the conversation. So somewhere on around September-ish, you know, Megan and I sat down before Vernice even walked in the door. And we had a conversation, and what I tried to do is just get I wouldn't even call it a 10,000-foot overview. I'd call it more of a 500-foot overview. And I think I ended up getting down to the ground, you know, by the time I was done with Megan, just on some things that didn't make sense. You know, we couldn't find some cash accounts based on your general ledger that you keep internally, you know, and your audit report, and some paper didn't talk to each other is the best way I can say it. And upon further review, we found out why. And I don't know what I know Vernice had a kind of an exit conference with you two and Megan, and Megan was certainly an important part of this process from start to finish. But we found out why. And I think that there's some best practice matters that we certainly want to talk about right now. I'll start with the library. You know, the town of Rockport operates a public library. It's unique, you know, because its birthrights go back to an agreement that was kind of adopted, you know, at town meeting. And the agreement outlines many things. I'd argue some aren't consistent with statute. And one of them is the fact that I believe, according to that agreement, their deputy treasurer needs to be the deputy treasurer of the town of Rockport needs to be a deputy treasurer for the Rockport Public Library, as it says in this agreement. And I'm not sure that I'm a fan of that as a best practice for sure. You know, just because of what we saw, the decentralization of the library. You as a board of selectmen are supposed to be signing library warrants in this same agreement that got signed in birth, you know, back there. But we don't see that. You know, we see a decentralized department We saw a cash account at the library that wasn't on your books, and really that's something that you want to bring in-house. We know, we're not doubting the integrity of those trustees or anybody over that library. We're talking about best practice. And when you look at that agreement, I definitely think that that's something that should be revisited, based upon what got passed at a 1980-something town meeting, with some of the practices that were kind of accepted there. They contradict statute, in my humble professional opinion. And that's an area that I would pay attention to. If I'm the town manager and treasurer of this town, I'm the town manager and treasurer of all funds of this town. And the fact that a specific position in this town is labeled as a deputy treasurer, I don't call that a best practice.
Are you referring to the endowment money as well as other operational monies that the library utilizes?
As I understand, it's all library funds. And if you go back and look, and we'd be more than happy to circulate you all the paper so you can see what we read. And that piece of paper at a town meeting duly established this library fund. And duly established, whether or not it's whether or not it's operation or it's an endowment, it names a deputy treasurer, as a town, not appointed by your treasurer, not appointed by, I'm not sure who appointed by, which is another whole issue. Who appoints this person? We don't know. It could be the trustees, but that person that's appointed also serves as a treasurer for that trustees. But the real story goes back to, how's that person appointed? Those library trustees are elected. That deputy treasurer is a statutory position by law. So now you're kind of picking and choosing, where that chair is and who resides, and more importantly, who is that chair? When you bypass your treasurer, who by law is supposed to be picking that deputy, I'm not sure at town meeting what the intent of that is, but I would bring your trustees together. I'd be more than happy to talk to them, because that's certainly an area, that I would look in on, and just the whole practice of how they move pieces of paper. And again, I don't want you to hear me saying that we doubt anybody's integrity, but what we do question is best practice, and certainly I think that that's something to look at if I was the town of Rockport, and the best practice with the library. And I think that Megan and Vernice and myself still try to get our hands around that. And Megan's coming up with some policy and procedural manual, I think long overdue for this town, to look at how you move pieces of paper, in this business. I think the library is one of the areas that you really need to pay some close attention to. It's a big department, they move a lot of money, and I think that there's a lot of things that I think that need to be revisited, and certainly I think you can get to some better practice and accomplish the same things that was the wishes of the towns some time ago. But statute always trumps charter and town meeting 10 out of 10 times. And I think that there's some statutory things that you need to revisit.
How you feel now, Ben?
Was it trustee?
No, he's our library
Gotcha.
director.
So, and again, don't let me hear you say, Ben, that the bad things are going on. I'm saying this to protect you all, too. Absolutely to protect you all, so. Your counter at your town office, there's cash collections there. I always believe in my mind, right or wrong, you always should be able to follow money backwards, because that's really where the story starts. And I think that based on how you cash up and some of your receipting policies and practices of town, it's hard to do that. It really is. And that's one area that I think that Megan and I looked at with your town clerk's office and that counter and just how it's collected the money. I think it's time to certainly revisit that and have some conversation and talk about some best practice. And more importantly, all the pieces of paper talk to each other. It should all be seamless. You have a very intricate accounting system. You have very intricate software that can keep track of all these things. And to put that money through daily, to have some kind of rhyme and reason on how you do it, not that you don't now, but to have a better rhyme and reason where all the pieces of paper talk to each other, I think that that's an area that needs to be paid attention to as well. You had a TIF account, that it took us a long time to find. And for some reason, these TIF cash accounts weren't on your books. They were in the audit, they weren't on your books. And I think between the TIF and the library made up a lot of the original conversation that Megan and I had of what we couldn't find. And we recommend, and I think now that practice has certainly changed, all your accounts be on your books. You as a board of selectmen are responsible for all the bills that are being paid at this town. I don't care if it resides at your, treasurer, tax collector, clerk, library, public works. You guys are the fathers of this town. And I think that there's some best practice that need to be there on how you disperse your money at this town as well. So, yeah.
Can I ask another quick question? I agree with what's in here and what you just said, just a curiosity question, is what you're talking about for best practices and how we account for this money when we first receive it or account for the payments out when we first make them. Are these technology upgrades or are these more human resource improvements, just a different
I
way
think it's
of?
more policy and procedure, internal control type of
Okay.
things. Just simple. I won't say simple, because I think that there may be a way on, on how this culture, for lack of a better way, how this process was birthed. And I don't sit in your chairs, but I'd be more than happy to get with the people that do. And I think that when you revisit those, these are really simple internal things that, Megan and I have seen, that are just another set of hands or eyes, on them that you're able to look at and certainly understand.
Okay.
And if you guys are up there making business decisions and you have something come across your desk that you're unaware of and you find out the reason why you're unaware is because it's not on a warrant that you guys are seeing or it's after the fact, that's a tough call to get. So, and we try to identify as many of those as we can and make sure you guys don't get that phone call. And I think that, through this process, we identified a few areas, that I think are simple remedies. I really do. From the time it comes into the door to the time it leaves. So, and I would argue that that's probably all I got, except for the fact that Megan and Vernice, myself, Rick will continue to work on a policy and procedural manual for some best practice, for you all and bring you information so that you can make the best business decisions possible with the information, that you're being provided and feel comfortable about that. I think that that's what our role is. It was great to work with Megan. She's got a lot of capacity. She certainly was a woman that had to understand to the point where it forced us to go into questions that should have been probably answered years ago. So,
Ask a question about signing warrants and the way we sign warrants here. What we do is we designate a primary representative from this board to sign warrants weekly or bi-weekly, whenever they're needed. That happens to be Mark for this year. And then we have another person who's the backup. And so our warrants are not brought to a public meeting. I know in
Yep.
some towns they are brought to a public meeting and signed that way. Do you have any thoughts on that
it's
process?
my understanding, Ken, that all warrants are to be signed at a public meeting. It's always been my understanding of statute, and I'd be more than happy to to get you the statute that applies to that. So, and if I'm out of turn or out of air, I'm not missing by much, because this question just came up about 3 weeks ago. And, and we're pretty confident, that you have to have some kind of public participation, which I think is inferred, by that statute as you're signing a warrant and releasing public funds.
So the actual mechanics of that, though, would you read through each warrant,
Nope.
paid check?
No, charter, so I just heard the question, charter never trumps law. Always the law is the highest form of law. So you've got federal law, you got state law, and then you'll have local. And Maine's a home rule state, so charter's very influential. But if there's a state law out there in statute that says that warrants are to be duly signed at a public meeting, you can't go write a charter, you can't go change, that in a charter, a charter amendment or modification or edit, or a charter. That state law will always trump your charter.
That's a new one for
So,
me.
and I'd be more than happy, it's a great question, I'd be more than happy to, over the next day or two, get Megan some research, but it's always been my understanding, and not just my understanding, just best practice, for goodness sakes, that they're to be signed at a public meeting.
I mean, again, from a practical standpoint, our meetings are already long, and if we're going over each
Yeah.
paycheck and
Yeah.
And I
No,
will.
no, it doesn't have to work that way. Just the chance and offer of you as a Board of Selectmen and the public to comment on any warrant. It's supposed to be a transparent process, as I understand, and that's a time. And if it's a simple approve warrant number 1A of 2018 1A, bang, approved. So it doesn't put the onus on you that you have to actually read every disbursement that's going on it. It's more that you offered a public participation as a board and collectively to the public to comment. So,
So perhaps, and maybe we can work on this over the next month or so to change that procedure. Perhaps we still have a designated representative and go in and go through
Yeah.
them and then present them at a meeting.
and I've definitely seen that, but usually the typical protocol is that there is, some kind of participation on the warrant, on your agenda is a warrant, was basically an item and a selection for warrant and discussion.
Right,
Just like with wastewater funds.
Yep.
Or wastewater commitments.
right.
And before you go change anything, just let me make sure that I'm giving you the best advice that I possibly can.
I'm
and the
checking
best
with our
practice
town
I can.
council right now.
And I'll work with Megan on that one.
That'd be
I
a
know
pretty
right to-
significant change for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
I'm-
wouldn't want to do it.
I'm checking with town
wouldn't
council
wanna do
right
it
now.
overnight, but that's why I asked the question, is because I know some towns do it differently
Yeah.
than we do. Ever since I've been on the board, we've always had just a board representative go in and sign the warrants in the office, so.
Can I ask a question, kind of building on that too? Under the segregations of duties, which I totally agree with, is the warrants that because I'm the backup to Mark, and I'll go in, and I did it when I'm on the Solid Waste Corporation, I go in and I sign the warrants there as well, or I used to. You're talking about the person responsible for maintaining the town's general ledger also approves the entry journals entries into the general ledger. What is the difference between, because it seems like Mark going in and signing for the warrants
Yeah.
does put another set of eyes on it that is separate from the people that compiled it, but that's different than general ledger
So
stuff?
after Mark goes in and signs it, if your finance
Getting it.
director chooses to say, okay, I know he just signed it, so out go the funds. Now I'm gonna change, that vendor from vendor A to vendor B, who's my husband, and has a personal business that they run in town. He's already signed it, it's gone under the cover of the check. I'm not gonna change the amount of the check. I'm gonna change the description of the check. And I could tell you all kinds of stories, and I don't wanna do that to have you guys have any sleepless nights tonight.
So it's
you
got-
know?
it's got-
So it's control.
It's got three
control.
layers already, though. Megan
Yeah.
first, the town manager second, and
Yeah.
then myself.
And I'd argue that Megan could go in and trump the town manager and you, or you if you're the
And we wouldn't
alternate
even know
at any
about
given-
it
and
for a
you wouldn't know
while.
about it, or arguably you wouldn't know about it. So, and that's what
Makes me
happens.
change my view of
And this
Megan.
is not a knock on Megan, it's a knock on the process, it's a knock on government, and it's a knock on having limited capacity to run, a business, with best practice. It is. So, and I would argue, again, in that same statute, about the public meeting, there are a few things that you can let go without a public meeting. I believe animal control officer, or animal control payments are one of them. There are certain payments to the state, for fees collected for the state. And I believe another one is payroll. I believe another one is payroll, and annually you're supposed to pass some kind of a payroll order to allow the distribution of payroll funds as a board. So and I'll get Megan all of that information.
Okay, does anybody have any further questions?
One final question. I will not be here a year from now when I anticipate getting the auditor's report for the next year. And I'm saying this for the board members, but also for you and for Megan. Some of these great recommendations in the management letter, are you going to be looking, when you come back to do audit 2.0 for the second time of doing it for us, are you going to be specifically looking at these?
We're talking exactly that right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so.
Because they seem like great recommendations. I just don't want it
Yeah.
to get lost in the sauce.
I'd say it's pretty fair to say as they came up, 2.0 is right here. She was already on the scene, making some adjustments as her job would allow.
That's typically how an audit works, they follow up on the.
Yeah. And Megan has been a great resource, and she's been a great sounding board. Hopefully we've reciprocated, but certainly she's given us everything that we've asked for, and we clearly are confident that our recommendations have been heard, and she's working diligently with Rick to implement.
In my experience, towns never go wrong by following the auditor's recommendation. It's never a bad thing to follow the auditor's recommendation. It can be a bad thing to ignore their recommendations. So.
just new because we haven't, since I've been on, we haven't gotten any
There's a
recommendations.
lot of right ways. There's a lot of right ways to do things. There's a lot of right ways to move pieces of paper. But when you've got your own ordinances, when you've got your own bylaws, when you've got your own charter, when you've got things in you're for lack of a better way to say it, going against what you've got for established policy and procedure, that never ends well. So I think if there's one thing that we've done is we've really opened up, Megan's and Rick's eyes to, just how you do business, and really whether or not it's best practice or is there a better practice. So that's the way I can say it.
Okay,
And this is one of the advantages to switching an auditor. You have a new set of eyes, and I'm assuming that with Ron's company, there's enough people on the bench that, to have additional people come in and look at different, so that we don't have the same person for the next 10 years doing it. We have somebody else switches up and comes in, and they may see different things, and it's always to our advantage to have another set of eyes point out places where we can correct and improve.
It's been a great pleasure if you guys have no other questions.
Great,
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
and
I
wanna
look forward to a next meeting.
I want to say thanks to Vernice as well.
Yeah,
Owen
she's
and
amazing.
I met with her, with Megan and Rick, and the information that she provided was outstanding. She did an excellent job.
And please, if you all have any questions, just reach out to Megan. She knows where to find us. We look forward to working with you.
And Vernice was a hoot, too.
was.
she's she's fun to spend time with.
Yeah, she's
She was.
a Down East girl for sure.
Yeah, she makes a dry topic like accounting enjoyable.
Yeah,
Absolutely, she's passionate.
Yeah.
Hey, it was a great pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron.
thank you, Ron.
On to the town manager's report.
Yes, I'll try to make it as it's not gonna be quick because we got the ambulance at the very end, but my report, the Tolman Pond Dam, that's moving forward, and there doesn't seem like there's any need for us to be involved. They found they've changed the level of hazard level. They've gotten the hazard level reduced, and then also they potentially have another party that will take ownership of the property around the dam, that will take the town off of that. Holiday in the Harbor was a huge help. Are you able to get this? Oh, you need that to. Holiday in the Harbor was a big help, a big hit, in spite of the fact that we had to switch to a different day. And I want to thank the many, there were too many volunteers to really list them all, but the volunteers that were part of the committee were Monica Kelly, Peter Ralston, Abby Leonard, Diane Hamilton, Mike Young, and Terry Smith. And they did, as always, a yeoman's work in getting out. I'm not sure, did you get out 2,000 luminaries this year?
Just about. They're a little
Yeah, which is a big undertaking, as Jeff is looking for the picture, right? If you go to the manager's report,
You got the packet.
yeah. No,
Turn this around for the people at home.
Peter made a copy of it for the town office as well.
oh, really?
Yep.
So you're looking at emails?
Yeah, but that's where the packet's gonna come in.
Oh, okay.
It should have come from Diane. Look for an email from her.
So meanwhile,
You
moving
mean-
on.
Meanwhile,
We did a lot of work putting this, getting pictures in here.
Yeah, well,
So the Holiday in the Harbor was a great success in spite of the weather, and it was done on Sunday, and the fireworks display, through the marvels of social media, I was able to watch the fireworks display remotely from vacation in Florida, and it looked amazing. Public Works Department has been very busy. I know it doesn't seem like we've had a ton of heavy snow, but they've had a lot of small storms. I don't know, Mike left. I'm not sure if they're out now or not, but they get called a lot. But they are out now, I think. So they get called out a lot for even some of these small events. This morning, they were called out at 3 this morning, so they were out, plowing it, sanding and salting at 3 o'clock this morning. Over Christmas, there's a great picture of Jimmy Aldis cooked a nice ham dinner for them, so that they made the best of the day, being out plowing all day. Fortunately, we haven't had a lot of issues with breakdowns because of the cold, because with that extreme cold comes broken equipment, hydraulic lines, all kinds of things. We've lucked out with that. And the recent extreme high tide didn't cause us any really serious problem. There was There was just one problem that we had. We have a picture of the parking lot at the fisherman's area flooding. But there's a low pump station, a low pump that's, drainage pump that's over by Rockport Marine that we had some problems with, but we're able to get that taken care of without any significant damage there. The fire department has been, as typical, has been very busy, and as I was writing this, there was a fire during the blizzard. What did the meteorologists call that?
Bomb.
Bomb,
Yeah.
something,
It
I don't know.
snowed.
It snowed. But they ended up getting called out right at the height of that, when the wind was picking up, managed to get the fire out. They were called also, Rockland and Camden was called out, but they were able to get it all put out pretty quickly. And also, the fire chief spent a lot of time, several days before the storm, reaching out to elderly in the town. He's developed quite a list of elderly and people in town to sort of keep an eye on, and helping them find shelter if they needed it. So several of them he was able to get moved out of their houses so that they could, they were not stuck in a house in case they lost power with that extreme cold. It didn't make it into my report, but I got Saturday, I got a picture of one of the local residents up on Gurney Street, snow blowing out his fire hydrant. And that, surprisingly, that really helps out a lot, because I think Jason has 90 hydrants? Megan, do we know? Yeah, 90 hydrants that he has to,
9-0?
90 hydrants that he has to take care of. Wow. So he, he can plow out some of them have to get hand shoveled. So if there's a fire hydrant near your house and it's easy for you to get to, and you have a snow blower, getting out there and getting that done makes a big difference in how safe your house is in the future.
Can I ask a quick question? And it's because we're talking about the cold weather stuff. We had some emails circulated about we could use the Masonic Lodge as a warming station, and they're gonna be working on getting a generator at some point over
Right,
time.
this spring, hopefully,
I know that we're trying to get a generator too at some point in time.
for the town office, yep.
If we do get that, will that be routed, that'll be routed to the fire station? The fire station has a
The
backup generator.
The fire station already has a backup generator.
So, but we don't have any place that is municipally owned and operated with a backup generator that can act as a warming shelter in the event that we have widespread power outage and sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah,
Well,
we had thought about if, in this storm, we were prepared for if the town office had power, but the Masonic Center didn't have power, I was gonna come in and open up the town office.
Richardson room.
The Richardson room, because that locks and there's bathrooms, and there's even a small
Little
kitchen
kitchen thing, yeah.
facility there. So that was the plan. I was gonna be able to come in and get that opened. But if it was widespread power outages, we would have had trouble.
Just something to think about
Yeah.
for next winter, hopefully next
Yeah.
winter, hopefully next winter.
Well, we've talked
We're
about the
done.
generator for the town office. I think it's gonna be in this year's budget. So,
I mean, the challenge with the town office is if it's a significant disaster and significant power outages that's going on for days, that town office becomes the emergency, kind of response center, different than the fire station. So we couldn't, if that was the case, we couldn't have people in the back room, because we'd be using the back room. But,
We're gonna use your office.
what?
We're gonna use your
Well,
office.
Yeah,
as
they
the
could sleep in
command
my
center.
office, yeah. So, finance, the audit, as you heard, has been completed. Megan has been working on budgets pretty diligently, and she and I it's her favorite time of the year, because she gets me in her office like 4 or 5, 6 hours a day. So we start working on the budget, tomorrow, and we'll be working pretty aggressively over the next month or so on budgeting. And as as you probably know, but residents may not at this point, several years ago, when I attended the ICMA conference, I heard a speaker talking about the importance of how helpful it is submitting our budgets and working your budgets to the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award. And it's a process that helps you develop a budget that is easily accessible to residents, the budget committee. It has all the information in it that's correct and easy to navigate through. And, at that point, when I talked to Megan about it a couple years ago, it was her first time on the job, but she was all over, yeah, let's go get that. And I said, let's wait a little bit. And so this year, we had time, and so she jumped on it early on in the last budget cycle of building some of the things into our current budget so that we could submit it. And as you heard me say on numerous occasions when we talked about this before, that I was hopeful that we would just get it back, that we'd be lucky if we won, but the idea was to just get it back with a list of things like with the audit. Here's some things that if you correct these, you'll get the A. And we got it back. That she had been successful. She had gotten all of the pieces all put together, and that we were awarded the Distinguished Budget Award, and we're only one of 2 towns in the state that have the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award. It's us and Freeport are the only 2 towns in the state, and there's 1,600 budgets across the country that have the Distinguished Budget Award. So Megan worked really, really, really hard on this, and it's amazing news, and it's really great recognition for the work that she put in, because she worked really hard on getting this done. And so what we're hoping to do is make a formal presentation, get the representative from GFOA will come to a meeting in February, hopefully. And were you able to reach out to them?
I did.
Yeah, you haven't heard back from them. They said they'd be willing to come in and make a formal presentation, because this is a big deal, and make a formal presentation at the next select board meetings, or at a future select board meeting.
Well, I'd like to thank her right now.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. I think that's wonderful.
It is. It's a tribute to the professionalism.
Yes.
And,
It's
Like,
reassuring.
I'm gonna frame this and hang this on my wall.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, but, Megan does like a challenge. She does well when you challenge her. You say, well, this is going to be hard, Megan, and she steps up to it every single time. So personally, I'm really proud of her. She's, every time we've asked her to do something, she's been able to pull it off for us, and it makes, on a personal note, it makes me very proud of her. So, thank you, Megan. So, police department, it's been fairly quiet in the police department over the past month, because Randy was on vacation a couple weeks of it. That's not the reason. But we're finally back up to full staff, which has been very helpful. I think that the new officer is still doing his field training, so he isn't doing his own patrol yet, but we're hopeful that he'll be out soon. And we're just in the exploration stage of reinstating the school resource officer, but at this point, we don't know if we'll have enough budget and we'll be able to pull it off or not. But for me, having a school resource officer is a really important piece of police work. I mean, we have a bunch of kids in that school, and to have them there without any police protection is just, it seems like they deserve good police protection. But we're just in the exploration part of that. as Ken mentioned, we have a bunch of training coming up. Is it this Thursday? And one of the training is the sexual harassment training, which is unfortunately very timely today with everything that's going on nationally. So we hired a special consultant, Deborah Whitworth. She'll come in and do the sexual harassment training, and she does it in two sections. There's one section that is a training for all employees, and then there's another section, it's a half-hour training that's specific to department heads and supervisors. So the staff Christmas party, which was held upstairs, was awesome, an amazing success. The ugly Christmas sweater contest. Thank you to the Public Works guys who really participated. The winner was Jimmy Aldis, as you can see on the far left.
Oh, my God, that's.
I take issue with the ugly portion. That's a beautiful
Yeah.
sweater. And we had another guy with a reindeer vomiting green
Yeah.
fluid. It was awesome.
Yeah,
These were great sweaters.
Yeah, it was great sweaters. Hopefully we'll get more participation next year. But it was a great success. And moving that thing from the Richardson room to upstairs was a big improvement because it gave everybody a bunch of room. It made it felt a little more festive. So the next, Jeff is moving me right along. Thank you, Jeff. The hospitality house, one of the things that the staff did this year was take on the responsibility of getting Christmas presents for other less fortunate people. And one of the things we did was collect gifts for the hospitality house, which you can see here was them going off. And then Jason did some work with other less fortunate kids collecting money through Toys for Tots, or Adopt a Family, was it? Adopt a Family. And we also had Toys for Tots as well. So the staff did an amazing job this winter collecting gifts. I don't know how many gifts were given out that were collected by staff, but it was really pretty amazing. And thank you to the staff for everybody that pulled this all off. So I wasn't here, but from what I understand, the people at Hospitality House were very thankful for all of the gifts. To be stuck in the Hospitality House on Christmas is not the best place to be. So we did a lot of that work. And so the Ambulance Review Committee meeting, this came in too late to get on the agenda, so I put it here on the, in my manager's report, and this is the reason Butch is here. We had an Ambulance Review Committee meeting last week to review where we are with the contract, and bottom line is, it's gonna cost us a lot more money. So Northeast has come up with several alternatives to the contract to save money. And so the Ambulance Review Committee has asked the four towns, the managers in the four towns to get some feedback from the select boards that are representative of those four towns about how you want that ambulance committee to move forward. And I included in your packages, I believe, you got a copy of the Ambulance Review Committee's, the Butch's
there.
presentation. Bottom line is it's gonna cost us more money. And there are two questions that are kind of lingering out there that the Ambulance Review Committee will need some help with, is, do you want us to go out to bid right away? Do you want us to go out to bid? We don't have a lot of time, but do you want us to go out to bid on this proposal? And then the next question is what is the level of service that you feel like is, that you want us to come back with as a proposal? As you can see from the proposal, there are three different options. Is it three or four? Four options. And when we had the conversation, during the meeting, Butch was saying that, and Butch is in the audience here, Butch was saying that his recommendation was that we used option number 3, which has a slightly reduced, number of paramedics on duty, but it saves us a batch of money. And the conversation always goes back to, well, you know, if we cut paramedics, if we don't have a paramedic on every shift on every truck, are we putting ourselves at risk? And, you know, Butch can explain the varieties of different risk, but
Can I ask a question before we go too much farther here? I see in your notes, they have a meeting this Thursday, the ambulance
Yes.
review committee is meeting again this Thursday, and what's the agenda for that meeting, and what hopes to be decided at that point?
well, the one question is, do we, to get a sense from you guys, do you think we should go out to bid with this? And the second question is, what is, you know, what do you think is a good level of service? What we currently have?
Well, let me weigh in here because I'm one of the people that was at the meeting along with Mark. And I'll also say I'm not going to be able to make the Thursday meeting, so if one of you other gentlemen want to step in at that meeting, that would be fine. A couple of issues. This whole process is a little bit discouraging to me. You know, I showed up at this meeting last week, and it turns out that this whole issue is incredibly complicated. And to think that our contract is going to turn over at the end of June, in just a few months from now, realistically, it's going to be extremely difficult to really do much other than end up with pretty much the same service we have. Yes, I do think I would recommend to my fellow select board members that we go out to bid. And I think that's always a good idea. My inclination would be to request for the same level of service that we get now, although it may cost a little bit more money. But again, that's just to maintain the status quo. And the reason that I say this is complicated, there were things I had no idea occurred. Apparently, Northeast Ambulance has a contract with Maine Health to do all of their transfers, and that is where the money is made in ambulance service. It's not the 911 accident calls and everything. So even if we go out for a request for proposals or quotes, any company coming in here is not going to have access to that transfer contract. So all they're going to be doing is taking care of the 911 calls, which are money losers. So, you know, again, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, and certainly Rick can comment and Mark can comment, but again, I just don't see we're going to really come up with any great solutions between now and the end of June. But again, yes, let's go out to bid, keep it the same level of service. Now, I'll take a minute to editorialize a little bit. I firmly believe that going into the future, 5 years from now, we should really be looking at a regional ambulance service that includes all of Knox County, Rockland. I know there's problems with doing that too, but it's the same as, you know, police, fire, all those services. You know, I think we ought to put them out there and have the taxpayers pay for the services they use and not be involved in all the transfers and trying to make money on the service and everything else. So, again, I'm looking down the road and thinking we should have a much larger regional presence for emergency medical services. Mark, you want to?
Considering the meeting was Wednesday, and I know Jeff had his meeting with Rick on Wednesday during the morning, I would have liked to have thought that it might have been on here tonight, even though it was a little heavy with other things, which would have given us another week to be able to do the bidding material. I don't think you're gonna get apples to apples, I mean, because of what Doug has mentioned. So you're gonna have to, for those that weren't there, the fee that you're gonna pay is substantially more, because you're gonna have an outfit coming in and they're only gonna be doing the 911 calls, because they're not gonna be able to do the transfers. And if that's the case, your fee is gonna go up dramatically, so I'm a bid favor person.
I guess my only, or well, one of my concerns is that we didn't have this on the agenda tonight because we didn't get it in time, and I feel like it's a discussion that the public really ought to have a chance to weigh in on. I'm a little concerned that the meeting is coming right up, and they're looking for a decision basically tonight from us as to whether to go out to bid or not, and more importantly, I mean, I think I know what the answer is going to be if we go out to bid, because I've been through this process with ambulance services before, and because of the transfer businesses, as Doug notes, I think that the current contractor is probably there isn't going to be anybody who's going to be able to bid on that 911 business and come in with anything more favorable financially for the town. I don't think. Now, maybe I'll be wrong on that. We'll see. But the level of service, I think, is something that we do need to discuss. I think there have been a lot of different opinions on that over the time that I spent on the Ambulance Review Committee as far as what's the right level of service, and I feel like we ought to have some input from townspeople, or at least have them have the opportunity to know we're going to talk about it and have the chance to come in and weigh in on that one way or the other. Like a lot of things, you can look at what I like to call analysis of the absurd. You know, we could park a paramedic ambulance outside every residence in the town, and that way we'd be absolutely sure that anybody who had a medical issue would have a paramedic at their disposal. But obviously that doesn't make any sense. And so you have to look at the whole level and look at statistics and say, well, what percentage of the time are we willing to accept that a medic might not be available when one is truly needed? And we have to use that as a guide for our determining the level of service. And but I do think that's a conversation that I'd like to have the public in on. At the meeting on Thursday, I guess I would ask, is there going to be another opportunity? If we instruct the town manager tonight to say, let's go out to bid and let's keep the current level of service, sorry, Jeff, is there going to be another opportunity to revisit that where we could get some public input?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it just, they're gonna, if that's the case, if you're saying, it does make sense that if we're bidding, that we keep the same level of service, and then, that way you're bidding apples and apples, you making apples comparison, and then it will come back to the 4 towns, it'll come back to the Ambulance Review Committee in the 4 towns, and if it's too high, then you have the opportunity to say, okay, does it make sense, can we
Well, but
do state?
let me interrupt there, because I don't think it necessarily has to go out to bid for the same level of service. I mean, we can choose a level of service that we would like, and then ask companies to bid on that. And I think that, looking at the data we have, we can make a decision on that, and we may have differing opinions on the level of service, and there may be different towns that have differing
But
opinions on the level of
But
service.
in order for us to get it out to bid quickly, in order for us to put the package together, get it out to bid quickly, so that we can get it back in and make a decision, you need to have some kind of level of service that we're gonna be asking them to bid for, and if you're saying you're not prepared to make a decision on level of service tonight,
Well, I'm just saying that there may be some public input that we're not aware of yet on that level of service question.
Well,
I mean, I know that we had this discussion a year ago in the Ambulance Review Committee about
Yep.
potentially lowering the level of paramedic service, and there was some support on the committee for doing that, but other people on the committee didn't want to do that, and so that's the way it went. And I think that's a discussion that we could have again. I mean, could we send this out to bid with using the options that Butch has presented in his thing and ask people to bid on every option? I mean, is that something that's worth thinking about?
I would think you could.
Well, go ahead, Mark.
You're gonna have to have all 4 towns agree on the level
Of service, right? And
service.
they're not in the same room to do it.
Right, so, I would say start at what you currently have and go from there unless you hear otherwise from the other town managers. I don't know whether Rick already has or not.
No, I think we're the first one to meet. I think, when does, what night?
Tomorrow, I think.
Tomorrow, Camden
Yeah.
meets tomorrow.
Lincolnville meets tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Skype them.
Well, I mean, I can say personally, I thought the argument that we received a year ago on the ambulance review committee for reducing the level of service made a lot of sense to me. And I would be comfortable with going with a somewhat reduced level of service compared to what we have right now, knowing that it's still going to provide pretty much the coverage that we need. So that's why I said, and I don't know how the other boards are going to go on that. And that's going to be the discussion, I think, is what's the level of service? So perhaps we could recommend that, a bid package goes out and includes maybe not all 4 options of service, but at least a couple that people, the different companies who were interested in bidding could say, well, I'll provide the service at this level for X number of dollars, or I'll provide at this level for Y number of dollars.
Can we, we have a vendor here, we have Northeast, Butch is here. Can we ask Butch if it makes,
If you want to come up to the podium
Does it
and
make sense to
answer a
have
couple
a-
of questions, that's,
that kind of several option, would that be too confusing for different vendors?
No, it's so if I could take 5 minutes and just present you guys, just like if I could start from the beginning, kind of where we're at. I mean, I can recap a little bit. Is that okay with all of you?
that's the rest of the board okay with that?
So
Yeah, that's fine.
basically what we're facing, the shortfall that we're facing is all call volume driven, and I want to make sure that it's well understood by everybody what we're facing. When we went into the contract 3 years ago, the last contract renewal, we were recognizing 400 calls more per year than we're recognizing now in 17. So 16 and 17 have been, each year have been 400 calls less. That is a mix of transfers and 911. A little more 911 than transfers, but it is a mix between the two, close to being 50-50. It's probably like 45-55. But again, and the transfers are important, and you guys all understand that. The transfers help subsidize the operation. So without the transfers, obviously it becomes very much more expensive. Rockland, there was a member of Rockland at the ambulance meeting, and he presented numbers that it's 2/3 of their operation, and Rockland is subsidized by the town, and 1/3 is generated from revenue from the service. And that would be about what you would be looking at if you dedicated 2 ambulances to the system here. Without the transfer work, it'd be about a 2/3, 1/3, probably looking at closer to $800,000 compared to the numbers that we've presented from Northeast. So it's purely call volume driven. I'm trying to get back to a net zero. I'll be honest, I've built in a small 10-run buffer per month to kind of to work with, but I'm trying to get back to a net zero. I'm not trying to expand this and make all kinds of money off the 4 towns. I'm truly just trying to pay for the operation to get us back to at least breaking even. And the 400 calls is about what that represents. So the 400 calls represents like $240,000 in lost revenues, just 400 per year. They're roughly, each call is worth around $560 per call. That's what we're using in this division to budget from. The issues that I do see moving forward with comparing what we have for options to bidding someone else is we have a system that works including the transfers. If you went to someone else and bid out, they wouldn't need 3 ambulances to cover the work, the 911 work. 2 ambulances without the transfer, you'd be looking at close to $800,000. If you come up with like some hybrid between that, so level of service really does matter. It's super important moving forward to really nail down what the towns are looking for, but it is tough to do if you're trying to compare the whole system that Northeast is currently doing that includes the transfers, and then a system that doesn't include that, because anyone coming in that's new wouldn't have that work. And again, the transfer work, and it's not a negative, it's a subsidy to your system. We get to count that revenue to the good to reduce you guys' subsidies. So that's probably the most difficult part of just taking this and saying, someone else give a proposal. the numbers actually would be probably much more than the 800,000 if you seriously went with, 3 trucks during the day and 2 at night. It'd be much more than that. So each, and every service is going to be about the same, but each 24/7, 365 paramedic level ambulance is roughly $600,000 a year. And then the community the 4 towns bring in somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000 worth of revenue from emergency work.
Guys, question? Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Where's the 800,000 number coming from? That's total operational, but our share of it, you're saying would be 315, but the 800,000 is
The 800
your everything?
No, so the 800,000 would be something that is not a real number right now. That's if the community wanted 2 dedicated trucks. So those 2 trucks did not do any transfer work. So that takes away having that relief of bringing in that volume from the transfers and just dedicates 2 ambulances to the towns. So again, each truck representing $600,000 a year, 1.2, and then you're bringing in about 400 to 450,000 in revenue, leaving 800,000 as a deficit. So the subsidy, if you just brought in, trucks to cover the 911, that's what you'd be looking at. Give or take 10,000 here or there on either end, but that's roughly what it would be.
Can I ask another question? Thank you. I for sure do not want to diminish or downplay the transfers at all, because I understand it's very intricate into making this make financial sense for you all. Why in a presentation to our board is it necessary, though? Because it's not anything that we contract out with you all. You're just including it as part of your general financial model because it is a community-wide, I guess, if the transfers, which are very important, are something that you have worked out with the hospital, why are we involved in that?
Because it's helping subsidize the entire operation. So what I'm bringing to the table is an operation that does both, and each one helps. I mean, really, the transfer side subsidizes the emergency side more than the other way around. But each, they really do play together. If you don't combine them and you don't combine the revenue from both, you end up with that. You would be talking $800,000 compared to 200 and something. So.
Rather rudimentary question. Is Northeast a nonprofit?
We are for profit.
You're for profit. So I'm just curious about what your profit margin has been recently.
That's not really something I'm willing to share tonight. But in this division, I will tell you that we've been operating at that $200,000 loss. We're able to pick that up and from the other divisions. It's one of the benefits from being multi-base and the state's largest service. We're able to do those things, but this division has been operating at a loss. We see value in staying here. Obviously, there's value in partnering with Maine Health. There's value, as you guys even discussed tonight, a regional system that excites me. Because with or without wanting to include transfers, it's if you do a system that includes all of it, actually you can. There's great potential here. So that's what we're. That's
I
what
don't want
we're
to take up a bunch
looking
of
at
time
when
for
looking at future
one last
business.
question.
But we just need to break even. So.
As for Tom's benefit, when we went into this process, how many years ago was it now? 4 or 5 years ago, when Camden First Aid had their issues. We had this expert in the state in emergency. Yeah, Rick Petrie from Emergency Management State came in and he educated us in emergency management, transport, and stuff like that. And the business is driven by call volume. It's the number of calls, and because we're a more rural area, by the numbers, we couldn't support a service with more than one ambulance probably if you did it strictly by the numbers. What they bring is they are also working in the urban areas where the call volume is higher, so that's how that for-profit mode works for them. I don't know if that helps or not at all, but it's an interesting businesses. We found out a lot about it 4 or 5 years ago.
One of the interesting things that came up as a result of the meeting was the Adam, I can't remember his last name.
Selly.
Selly?
Maselli.
Maselli. Oh, from
Adam
Rockland,
Maselli
yeah.
from Rockland, who is a Rockport resident, was talking about, you know, they have a service in Rockland and it's run by the city, but you know, I don't know how many ambulances they have, 2 or 3.
So I think they fluctuate between 2
Yeah.
and 3.
But 2/3 of the cost of that service is picked up by the taxpayer because they do not do any transfers. They do not do any hospital transfers. So their costs are, 2/3 are all picked up by the taxpayers. And it's substantial. The transfers, it makes it confusing because of the transfer work, but it actually reduces the cost that our taxpayers have to pay because they're making, you know, they make money on transfers. It's money that they know is coming in.
Well, it's cost that comes out somewhere. It's cost that you bear if you end up needing one of those transfers.
Oh, yeah,
It's
right.
cost that you bear if you have health insurance that drives up the rates,
Right.
that pays for the, I mean, the money, it's not a free lunch.
No, it isn't. No, you pay,
absolutely not.
they usually pay for it.
So back to the question that brought you to the podium originally, which is, and it sounds like, I asked the question about, is it worthwhile to bid out a few different levels of service and ask bidders to produce a number, but it almost sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, it almost sounds like you're saying that anybody else who's gonna bid on the contract is gonna not be bidding apples to apples with you guys anyway because of the transfer business.
Very correct, yeah. It may be tough to really to define that level of service. I mean, it's like how many trucks? If someone else was to come in, they certainly would not need to come in with 3 trucks.
It may be that all we get to tonight is that that the board feels that we should bid it, that the ambulance review committee should start to work on getting it bid out. And then we'll have to figure out how to do that. I haven't gotten back.
Yeah, I think the conversation on level of service is a longer conversation than we have time for tonight personally.
And I don't think we can do anything tonight. I think your point that this wasn't on an agenda and it doesn't necessarily serve the public for us to take action tonight
No.
is a valid concern.
I mean, I guess I'm okay with them, defer to the rest of the board, but if the committee wants to begin the process of, you know, starting the process of going out to bid without actually having an approval to go out to bid, there's a lot of work that's gonna have to go into
Oh, yeah.
that. I would be okay with them doing some preliminary work
We're
on
gonna
that.
have to do that work. And then
Depending
just-
on what other towns decide, but I'm not comfortable with recommending a level of service tonight without more public input.
And that's my final question, is on the level of service. Because I'm like kind of woefully ignorant in this space, I've been trying to do some catch up to understand what are the different bits and pieces, and I'm kind of at the Doug stage of, wow, there's a lot more here than I was aware of. I would be looking to our public safety folks, our police chief and our fire chief primarily, to try to, and reaching out to the harbor master, reaching out to our various departments to try to get a understanding of what we think our needs are. Has there been good interface between you and our public safety folks that could make some of this decision-making easier? Like, in your company's assessment, you think option 3 is the best, and that is concurred upon by our fire chief, our police chief, our public safety folks, or is there a discrepancy between the two?
I think there is some discrepancy. I think that was obvious in the meeting, the last meeting. I think the biggest hurdle that we need to overcome is, and this really is just, it's defining what you all want, what each town wants. That the biggest thing is that dedicated versus the 3 trucks that interact between the entire system. So transfers and 911 together, or a dedicated resource. And we, Northeast, we strive and do our best to keep a truck available. So we will not do a non-emergent routine transfer if there's only 1 truck in our system. I won't stand here like I did the other night. I learned that it's not happening 100% of the time with the people in the room that, even some of our employees that were in the last meeting. But most of the time, that's what is directed to happen. When it's not happening, it's most likely it's an ALS level transfer that's coming out of Penn Bay. So that's, you know, if there's only one more truck left in the system and there's an urgent transfer that needs to happen out of Penn Bay to Eastern Maine or Maine Med, that is taking priority, and then we're using mutual aid if needed in town. But our operational team has been told to, if you're down to one truck, it doesn't do transfers. The hospitals and the nursing homes will wait. And, you know, we have some time to kind of play on the transfer side, time requirements that we can meet, that we still have a great on-time performance with the hospital, but we're able to keep that resource available.
So what you're saying is that if the hospital calls and says, you know, I've had a brain aneurysm and I've got to get to such and such, and I've got to get there immediately, then that would mean that last truck would go? But it's
Correct.
only in that kind of a case? If it's just that, oh, I need to get to I need to get to Maine Med in the next 24 hours, it would wait?
Yeah, the non-emergent ones are waiting, and most of the non-emergent ones are the ones that are in town. So it's, you know, hospital to nursing home, or the nursing home to somewhere local. Those ones are being not really delayed because we still have a great on-time performance with them, but they're being postponed a little bit to wait for the other truck to become available, and then we're using. So we're always trying to keep a resource available in town, and I think that's so that going back. I know I kind of went all over the place there, but to go back to answer the question, some folks feel like there should be a dedicated resource to the community, and it's not used for transfers ever. And once we cross that line, it becomes expensive. You know, it's and then even more expensive if we turn one into two. So again, each truck 24/7, 365 is $600K. It's the cost. Most of that cost is people on the truck. Is, you know, that's probably 85% of our costs is just salary. So.
Okay, well, I think we've gone about as far as we can go with this tonight.
The general consensus?
I think the
is that it should
general
get-
consensus is to at least begin the process of drawing the biddings together, but I think we need more conversation on the level of service question. And if you can, you know, and that, maybe I'll try to go to that meeting on Thursday if Doug can't go.
Is that a midday meeting? Evening meeting?
Evening.
After what time it's here, correct? Yeah, it's in this room at what time?
And when we have our special meeting to discuss just this, can we make sure that our police chief and fire chief are?
Yeah, if, depending on the outcome of that meeting, this board has a meeting scheduled, and we're talking about it a little bit about the library on the 22nd. If we have to have a one-agenda meeting rather than workshop to discuss this issue, we can think about possibly doing that then if it can't wait till February.
Yeah, quick thought, let me just weigh in on that a little bit, because I think Owen is, I think that point is very important to have those two people at this meeting. I understand about public comment, and it's important in a small-town democracy. That's how we work. But the problem that I discovered, and I saw it at this meeting the other night, is you know, you have some people who tell very poignant personal stories that,
Yeah.
you know, this family member was saved because there was an EMT instantly available. And I understand that. But that's not a real useful viewpoint when it comes to looking at demographics, and you end up with the analysis of the absurd, you know, which is what you said. You know, at some point, we have to make a decision about what level of service our community wants and can afford.
We do, and I guess my point, I probably misspoke. I mean, yes, I'm always willing to take public comment, but I think the greater point is there was no notice that this discussion was going to happen tonight.
Yeah,
And so for
right.
those who
Yeah,
may want to
sure.
come and listen to the discussion, I think we need to,
Yep.
Yeah.
take care of that. Okay, let's move on. Thank you, Butch.
That meeting is at 5:30, by the way.
Unfinished business. The status of the select board representation on the middle school building committee.
So I'm gonna have to step off for this.
Okay, and I think this will be brief. The school board did decide to remove Owen from the committee. That was their right to do that, my opinion, and our only task right now is to decide if we want to send a different representative to serve as a liaison or a member of that committee. I have said in the past that I simply don't have time. kind of the remaining board members sitting up here, that's the two of you. I don't know if either of you have any interest in serving on that committee.
I'll say, as I said in the past, I don't, but I would encourage you to invite the chair to us once a month to give us an update.
School board chair?
Right.
Okay. I can make once a month. I think he probably would not come once a month, but I think having him come to give us an update once in a while
Probably
would be good.
wouldn't look good if he didn't come.
Okay.
Yeah, again, I don't have the time or the skill set to be of use on that committee.
Okay. So I'm sensing from the board then that no action needs to be taken on this item. Okay.
But just real quick for the folks at home that may think that we're at a deficiency, though it is one less Rockport member there, citizen or select board, we have Will Gartley as a member of Rockport, Anastasia Fisher is a member of the committee, George Abendroth. Are those the three that we have? I'm just trying to give anyone watching a picture, and I mean, sure, there's more Camden members than there are Rockport members, but it's not like me not being there makes it so there's no Rockport representation. I wish it was more robust, but it's not like there's no Rockport people there
We have some
saying.
good Rockport people there, yeah, okay. Okay, so we'll move on. Next item is to vote to approve the general assistance ordinance amendments, appendices rather, that we had the public hearing on. This is a housekeeping item that has to be done every year, and as the manager noted, we had changes in the GA in the office this year, and so we're doing this a little later than we ought to have. And basically, it's the updating of the levels at which general assistance becomes available and the numbers we have in our packets. So I would entertain a motion here.
I move to approve the general assistance ordinance appendices A to D, effective October 1st, 2017 through September 30th, 2018, as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have just a couple of quick things if I could.
Yeah.
One is, so I guess I kind of understood why, because like the first thing that stuck out to me was it's effective October 1st, 2017, and we're in 2018.
Yep.
So this is an understandable time lag between October 1st and now that we're approving this?
Well, typically, because we had a change in GA administrators and there was a transition there, typically we would have had this in advance of October 1st
Right.
to adopt it.
And-
Rick?
Yeah, and Janice from Camden was handling our GA, and then when I think, Linda, you were discussing this too, is when we started bringing it back to us, wait a minute, we haven't updated this, because Janice said she couldn't do it anymore, she wanted us to take it back, and Linda brought it up that it got missed, because that was something Stacy normally did.
So quick question, are we paying out for GA on the 2016-2017 schedule or on the 2017-2018 schedule?
2017-18 schedule.
So we're paying out GA on a pricing model that we haven't approved yet.
I think by law we have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we have to vote this, but we really don't have much choice in the matter when it comes right down to it.
Okay.
It's a state statute.
Second thing was, I just thought it was fascinating, I'll make it super quick. Everything else went up. Overall minimums, housing minimums, personal care, supplement for, everything went up except for food maximums. Food is the only thing that went down, which I just thought was fascinating. Went down by about a little less than $1. But isn't that odd? And anyway, the last thing is we're approving appendixes A through D, and it seemed like appendix C was an optional one. Do we have, maybe I overlooked it, do we have an appendix C already defined, or it looked like there was a range of options for an appendix C? Do we pick one? Do we not have an appendix C?
I'm trying to find these things.
Appendix C was part of mine there. I don't know whether that's,
I think we have put up.
And I'm sorry, I thought I had it circled in here somewhere. That, yeah, so on this
Yeah.
page 1 of something, it's under Appendix C, it says the applicable figures for Appendix C, once adopted, should be inserted here. And then you got a range of different Appendix C options.
You have to choose your county.
Yeah, you have to pick, it's
Yeah.
by
It's by
county.
county,
So,
you would-
and
would
we
choose
have to
not.
plug it in, but I felt like I read somewhere that we had like, that was like guidance to do that.
No, you have to.
No, you have
You
to
have
pick
to
the
use
one
that
for your
number.
county. It's income guidelines.
I just don't understand why they wouldn't plug that in for us if we already are required to pick the one that applies to us, why it wouldn't just be plugged in
I
already.
think it's just a language issue. They
Yeah.
shouldn't have
Okay.
said
Yeah.
opt,
Yeah.
it said-
All right, that was it for me, I thought.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, those are passed. Okay, we've already done item B. Acknowledgements of gifts to the town. We had a payment in lieu of taxes from Coastal Opportunities.
I move that we accept the payment in lieu of taxes from Coastal Opportunities and send them a very nice thank you card.
Second.
And the amount, it should be in the motion as well.
Sorry,
$300.
in the amount of
$300.
$300.
Yeah, it's always nice when these organizations who are not required to pay taxes realize that they get benefits from the town. I see this every time, that they contribute, so it's very much appreciated. Any further discussion on the motion?
Second.
I think we had a second, didn't we?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? And that's a unanimous vote.
Have we had any response to the other letters that we sent out to
Not
the?
much. We
not much?
got a few in, correct? I think pretty much no surprising ones, no new ones.
Okay. But at least we made the
We
effort.
seem to have
Okay.
repeat customers.
The
It's a
repeat customers,
It's
I
a
think we
repeat
do,
few.
and it's, when the word gets out that people are doing it, perhaps we'll add 1 or 2 organizations a year, who knows? We have a committee resignation this evening. Larry Goldman from the Opera House Committee.
I move to accept the resignation of Larry Goldman from the Opera House Committee, effective immediately.
Second.
With a note thanking him for his service.
I think it's in it should be in the sign package there.
Oh,
thank-
thank you for your service, thank you.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that passes. We had decided earlier to not act on the Opera House Committee nominations for this evening, or applications, but we do have an application from Maggie Timmerman for the Keep Rockport Beautiful Committee.
Is there a, appointment range?
I think that previously on this committee, because it's just being formed, we had not determined the terms, and I think when that committee first
Yeah,
gets together,
we're
we'll
gonna
have to.
sort that
We'll
out.
have to sort that out later, so it would be for.
I move to accept the committee application for Keep Rockport Beautiful by Maggie Timmerman with a term
be
not
to
yet
be determined.
determined.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Maggie has obviously been key in this effort so far.
Very.
She's a hard worker. That's all I have to say. Any further discussion on this motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? No, okay. Safety mission statement. This is a very simple statement that we do every year. So I'll look for a motion there.
I move to approve the safety mission as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion at all?
Just real quick, it's great, it's awesome, it covered, but it's got no pizzazz to it. It doesn't like, doesn't grip you like a Agatha Christie novel or something.
No, it's meant to be, as Joe Friday would say, just the facts.
Just the fact.
Well, then we succeeded.
Any further discussion?
Should we explain who Joe Friday is?
Please don't.
All in favor of the motion?
Did we have a second?
Yes, I think we did.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
You did.
Yeah, okay. Any opposed? No, okay, that's a unanimous vote. The harbor fee schedule. We have a new harbor fee schedule which talks about increasing fees, and if, Abby, if you'd like to come up and give us the lowdown on this, that would be great.
So I'm coming up on my either ninth year. Oh God. And there's been one. I have actually across the board done one fee increase. As a whole, looking at the whole fee schedule, and the harbor committee. When I first started, the sentiment was, let's try to keep trying to increase revenue without pricing people out. But I do think it's time to look at, getting our fees in line with other harbors. One of the things that I've done is taken Camden and Rockland and put us literally and proverbially right in the middle. So we're a little less expensive than Camden is, and our fees are a little higher than Rockland. And so even with these fee increases that you see in front of you, we'll still be right about there. One of the major ones that you'll see is the commercial float and parking fee, which Doug has been at the meetings too, so he can kind of speak to what he's heard. But there's a lot of sort of trying to make it equitable across the board, make fees equitable. So if recreational boaters are paying a certain amount, they pay, some non-residents pay $250 to keep just their dinghy on a tie-off. Yet the commercial fishermen for $150 are getting the use of the commercial float, loading and unloading, a parking space for the captain and the sternman, and a place to keep their skiff for $150. So the committee then proposed the $350, and in thinking of that, you have the memo from me in front of you. I felt like, more than doubling it is hard to justify. But, just kind of giving it to you all to look
So you're
at.
suggesting then that what's in the table be reduced by
300.
from 350?
Yep. And I reached out to some of the fishermen, and they said they were going to be here, but they're not.
And one other question, I'm looking at the table, I don't know if Jeff can bring up the table, but at the very top,
Page 179.
I'm assuming that's moorings. There's no heading on that. It just
Oh,
says
did it
residence,
get
rental,
cut off?
et cetera.
Yes, it should say it's the mooring heading. Yep. And then so one of the things we were talking, just sort of, we upped the launching fee for commercial launch drivers, and the fees, and then kind of looked at it as a whole and went up, a dollar in the dollar per foot category to be more in line with kind of what Camden does. So that we were kind of across the board. And obviously the goal is a balanced budget, which we are not without capital, we're not too far from at all. We're still a little ways, but we're working on it.
Yeah, let me give you a little background on this as your liaison. I have to take a lot of the responsibility for pushing the Harbor Committee to raise some of these fees. I suspect the lobstermen aren't here right now because they're taking the tires off my truck, but when I go out.
I hope they get your truck, not mine.
They're probably watching and saying, well, that's a good idea.
But one thing I did learn going to the Harbor Committee is that actually a lot of the money that comes into the harbor is beyond these fees here. And I'd forgotten completely about, for instance, the lobster buyer that's down there, Scott. When I was looking through the audit, it popped out at me that I think he pays $700 a season.
Yeah.
Which,
$1,500, $1,800.
Yeah, in 2017, that's what we received, was $700, according to the audit.
I
All
haven't
right,
seen
well,
the audit, but it should be more.
At any rate,
Yep. It's not much
the
more.
bottom line here is, for that little piece of real estate right there on the water, I'm thinking about renting it after his contract runs out for $750, because that's a nice piece. But the
Smells like bait.
well, just all seriousness aside, that's really pretty cheap. And then also the boat club. I don't, off the top of my head, know what the boat club pays for its rental.
$6,500.
$6,500, and Twiggs Boat and the food truck and the wedding. So again, if we want to erase the $20,000 to $50,000 deficit that the harbor runs at each year, we're not going to be able to do it just by raising these fees. When the time comes that these various contracts and agreements run out, we're going to have to look at raising the lobster buyer cost, the boat club cost, maybe Twiggs Boat, the food truck, and the price we charge for weddings. But this is at least a start. And again, our goal really here is to try to spread the cost of the harbor out over the people that use the harbor. So
try to be more equitable about what they're getting for the services and.
Is the electric service included in the overnight dockage fee, or is that a separate
That's an
fee?
additional fee.
Okay, but that's not on this list.
It should be. It's not.
Do we
It's
actually
$10
make
and
money off
$20.
that?
Maybe it's not. What's that?
Do we actually make money off that, or are we just charging for the electrons they use?
We charge a base fee. So for 50 amp power, it's $20. For 30 amp, it's $10 a night. But yeah, that
we
was
make
mostly-
money. It's not
Yeah.
Like we
metered.
make a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're not.
Cover our
We're
costs
probably
anyway.
covering the cost.
And is there, if they're not here, is there a proposed change in that or not?
No, nope.
I seem to remember last year I asked the same question about the electric fees not being here, but we
Yeah, I
should-
don't
we
know.
should
I'll
include
make
them
sure
on
they
the
get
list.
they get
Okay.
back put on there. They should be right.
Abby, a few months ago, we had a harbor-related issue here related to the size of a boat and the mooring where that boat sat. And one of the issues, the ideas that came out of that discussion was to designate certain parking spots with a different fee. Has there been any more discussion around that? Any work done around that?
Parking spots by you mean like mooring spots?
Particular moorings, yeah, that might get charged a higher fee.
Yeah, that would pose a lot of logistical issues of, I think, we haven't really talked much about doing that just because, I mean, it's hard to explain why that wouldn't necessarily be, we tried to sort of integrate that in the cost per foot. So we up that to $2 a foot. So there you are paying a little bit more for what you're taking up. When I first started, it was just a flat fee and so we kind of captured that a little bit in the per foot charge. But we'd have to displace, you'd have to displace many different moorings to sort of allot for bigger, more premium spots. And that would be hard
The
to.
reason I remember that is because when we were having that discussion, and I don't want to dredge up that particular issue, although I suspect it's one we'll have to revisit.
Yeah, it's still
Dredge up.
something
not too
to
far
discuss on that
down.
I
in
mean,
future.
you made the comment at the time that that particular boat, the size of that boat in that spot happened not to be an issue because of that particular spot.
Right.
So that's why I'm curious about whether, I'm trying to find, like, I'm not seeing the connection between that and what you just said, so maybe I'm missing something.
It happens to work in feet, it's not in, I wouldn't have said if you told me that a 50-foot boat was going to sit there, I would have said, it's not going to fit there. It went there, and it fit, and for whatever reason, it's 48 feet, sorry, Kenny.
Yep, it-
But, and
I'm
it
really
actually
asking
worked.
out of
just
curiosity, I'm
right,
not trying to put you on
right.
the spot.
No, I guess I'm not really articulating exactly what I'm trying to say by allotting particular spaces that are more of a premium, because we try to do it a little bit with the Inner Harbor, that we charge more for the Inner Harbor than we do anywhere else.
Yeah.
Charge more for non-residents than we do resident, just things like that.
Yeah.
But
That issue will come back to us with a proposal, I think.
yes,
something
yep,
like
we have a workshop on Thursday for the same thing, for a bunch of ordinance changes, but that mostly.
So I think, what's presented makes sense to me. The only question is that the committee has, the difference between what the committee recommends on the commercial float and parking, which is the 350, and what Abby is recommending, which is 300 on that. So the board needs to,
And I can give you a little more, just the
Side
fact
on
that
that one.
it was hard to justify more than twice the fee. It was kind of hard to swallow and explain. Even though
still-
it's not a big discrepancy.
I have a couple of questions. Like, I don't want to drag this on, but I totally have a couple of questions.
ahead.
Okay, one, this is an easy one. Commercial marine service permit, it looks like it's new.
It's a new fee.
What is it?
So that is going to include, for instance, Johansson Boatworks, Rocknax, Bondell, Sales and Rigging, basically your outfitters that come in the spring and use the floats primarily to outfit their boats that we weren't really capturing other than the $10 an hour over that free hour. We weren't really capturing any revenue, and that's a very missed revenue maker right there. And then in the fall, they do the same thing. So it's anybody operating. There's a outfit that wants to do mast, that's going to step masts in and out of the harbor. So that's just basically paying a commercial fee for the use of
That's an
of some
annual fee?
time. That'll be an annual fee, yep. And that's just our first stab at collecting something from those folks.
Cool.
One of them makes a donation, don't
They
they?
do, and that, that, as Doug had brought up in the meetings, poses some,
Right.
equitable issues and how that could seem. So we're kind of doing away with
The-
just allowing that to happen and setting a fee.
And then everybody pays.
Everybody pays it, and, it doesn't, what the problem is, it doesn't, we're not leasing them any space, because so it's not guaranteeing them the right to be on the float, because we want to make sure the priority is residents and recreational residents coming in and out of those floats. So we don't want it to, we could make a lot of money by leasing out commercial space. However, it would take away from what I think our mission, what I hope our mission is.
Another quick question, and I'm guessing on the overnight dockage, the reason that none of those numbers have changed, because that's been a kind of recent development.
It has, and we're really trying to attract more. We're really trying to do our best to attract more, and we don't want to price ourselves sort of out of the game. And it is still very reasonable, and we could probably stand to go up. But I would like to see us really start again having full docks. Not that then we would
Makes
gouge
sense.
people, but having some full, having full floats and getting it utilized. We definitely have made more revenue this year than we have before, so it's coming. But
And then I've got two last questions, but they're a little bit harder. On the moorings, so for non-inner harbor, you've got residential fee, base fee of $100, and then non-res is $200. So there's a doubling for non-residential folks.
right.
Except with the inner harbor numbers, your resident rate is $200, and for non-residents, it's only $225, which kind of makes sense, except when you look at the non-inner harbor stuff. And so the precedent, which is the precedent, that non-residents pay twice as much, or that is this
That was sort of those numbers have been
Old.
totally grandfather, but I mean I'm willing to totally look at that. Makes sense. I mean that's what we're trying to do. That's exactly your thinking, is that we're just trying to sort of have a logical explanation for all of the jumps. But that's
Yeah, I hadn't caught that, and, I could see that being $300.
But there aren't any.
and I don't even know is that I could name.
Oh, and you've even
There aren't a hell of a
No,
lot
there
of
aren't
them.
any. I mean I don't
That's
think
the
there's
other-
any non-resident inner harbor.
Yeah,
and then the discrepancy, if you
Not-
look at
I can't think of one.
No, I'm serious.
yeah.
if you look at the increase too on non-res outer harbor moorings, that even gets bumped up. So now with the new proposed, residents pay $100 and non-residents pay $225.
We did just sort of not
But
necessarily.
the inner harbor ones didn't change any,
they didn't get
and there's
bumped.
only a $25 difference between the two of them.
Right, that
Well,
could stand to
the
get.
proposal is no difference.
Right, but I mean existing,
Yeah.
there's only a $25 difference. And so because I'm not necessarily super comfy with doubling everything. I get it, you're at year 9 or whatever. It makes some sense.
Oh, I'm not full for just across the board sweeps of doubling everything for sure, and that's probably why it.
But here's the question is, if the answer is no, it's totally cool, and I wouldn't necessarily expect you all as a harbor committee and the harbor master to run all of these numbers as it relates to your budget and the gap that we're potentially trying to get to a break-even point. Does this basically doubling of certain aspects, does this narrow this gap to like a really manageable place, and would not necessarily doubling those put us at a more of a disadvantage of, I understand if you go from $1 to $1.50 versus the $2 you're proposing, you're missing out on half of that additional increase revenue. But is that necessary to like get us to a break-even point super quick, or is it just how the thinking was?
No, it was just sort of how the thinking was, and in
Well,
when
I think Abby said that she looked at Camden and
that's what I said,
Rockland.
and I would say that the
Fits.
committee looked at the comparison and didn't want to if we went up on
and,
double on
you know,
everything, it would be like, whoa, what is
Going
Rockport
up
trying to do?
on the per foot charges by twice doesn't double the fee.
Right.
It doesn't double the base fee, but it
Right.
doubles your per
But
foot
if,
charge.
let's say you
So
got
if you have a
50-foot
30-foot
boat, it's gonna be an extra,
$50.
$50.
So if you're a 25
Gonna
foot
go
boat,
from
you're gonna pay
150.
$25
I was
more.
about to say every dollar counts, but you know what? If you have a boat in the harbor, maybe you could sell your boat if you can't
Well,
afford it.
I think the two items I've identified in the discussion that we might want to look at would be the Inner Harbor non-resident base fee, and as Abby suggests, the, where is it, the commercial float and parking fee. Does the board want to think about amending those two and then move on with this, or what do you think?
I'd be comfortable with that.
I asked Doug, you're the liaison, what do you think? You could set both of those to 300, and
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with that.
does that,
And I own a boat.
does that make
Yeah,
sense?
but you're a resident.
I don't have a mooring.
Anybody
But there
complain?
There aren't any.
aren't any in the harbor.
But it would, you know, if we had one. it
Well,
would-
I would entertain a motion then, if there's one out there to be
But
made.
most of the money to be made from the increases is in the per foot. How many moorings do we have?
300, give or take.
300 give or take, and the average boat size is 30.
Yeah, I'd say, 28 feet is what I use for my 28, 30.
So people are gonna pay $30 to $40 more.
And times 300, so there's a substantial chunk of money there.
But that base fee is, okay. So, do you want me to take a stab at a motion?
I'd love to have somebody take a stab at one.
I move to accept the proposed fees for the Marine Harbor Park effective January 1st, 2018 through December 30th, 2018, as written with the following amendments. The Inner Harbor non-resident fee will be raised, based fee will be raised to $300, and the commercial float and parking fee would be reduced from $350 to $300.
Have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion?
No, I was just kind of curious about public comment. I wanted to hear from someone who owns a boat and what that means to them, but we're already dragging on pretty far, so.
What I hear, so. Fishermen are invited.
Now, wait a minute.
Okay. No, if there's no further discussion, all in favor of the motion?
Who seconded the,
I
Doug
did.
Doug.
thank you.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
And thank you, Doug, for spurring this on.
I don't even know what those are.
Okay. The next item is to vote to approve a,
Abby, could you at some point just run these numbers and give me an idea of what it's going to increase us? Thank you. Yeah, there's no rush.
next item is to vote to approve a contract with Stephen G. Smith Architects to design a new Rockport Public Library. And I learned that shortly before the meeting, the town manager had sent the contract to our
Attorney,
town attorney, and it came back with
with a
a bunch
list
of-
of,
I'll let Rick explain.
which Steve has a copy of that list. And have you ever had a chance to look the list over, Steve? A list of proposed, some questions she had with different sections in the contract, which is a little bit surprising considering that we sent this contract to them before and they looked it over. And the only concern that they had at that point was bumping up the insurance amount from 500,000 to $1 million coverage. So, I mean, what does these changes mean to you?
Yeah, let me just explain.
Steve, could you come up to
You
the,
need
to
to
the
go to the
podium,
microphone.
please? Thanks.
This is kind of a curveball at the last minute, because I thought we were all set.
Let me just explain the process behind it. All of our contracts are issued by the AIA. You don't buy them in stores. And when we were filling out the contract for this project, Rick emailed us the standard form that you had already approved by Reed. That was dated 2007 contract form, the AIA contract between an owner and an architect. That form is outdated, no longer available, and the contract you have in front of you now that we filled out is 2017. That's the latest contract. It's virtually the same. There's been minor format changes, but the language, the wording, the sections are almost identical. Our fee proposals and Reed's proposals are virtually identical also. So having filled that out and submitted it to Rick, he had one or two minor questions. We discussed that last week. And then in arriving here tonight, we've got a full page of questions from the attorney regarding sections from section 1 to section 11. Most of these comments have to deal with the AIA contract itself, not the information we filled out. So I think what I need to do is sit down with Rick. Normally, we never have hired an attorney to represent us on the contract because the language is pretty standard and boilerplate, but I think I have to get someone to address these issues with the town attorney at Bernstein Shore because they have to do with really the formatting of the contract and the boilerplate language in it. So that's where we stand tonight. That doesn't preclude us from working on the project. We've been working on the project for the last, since December 27th. So we're continuing to do the work on the library, and this is, I think, technical information that we just need to either clarify, and maybe someone in this office wasn't familiar with the AA contracts, but I've never seen this amount of questions.
I'm surprised that it came, and I sent it out because ahead of, I figured one of you would say, has this been run by town council? And I wanted to be able to say, yes, it had been run by town council, the same as the last contract was. And then I got this back at 5:48. So,
There's a lot of stuff in here.
yeah, and I don't know what she's referring to, and I can't really.
I mean, it's just odd. I don't know if I've seen something from our attorney that says absolutely delete a boilerplate section
Right,
from.
Yeah, and I've never run into this before. We filled out this format, the 2007 that we've been using, and this format has been used for years, and I've never seen these.
And none of this, most of this format, there were some changes, but none of them are in this boilerplate, substantive changes in this boilerplate stuff that she's picked up on.
Like the one that she
Section
says
8.
absolutely delete is
Yeah.
reimbursable
I think that's
expenditures
reimbursed.
to
That means
other
we're not gonna
similar
pay-
project-related
That means we're not gonna pay Will
expenditures.
Gartley his
Yeah.
consulting fees. Anyway, I think we can work this through. It's just a matter of getting together with the attorney and trying to figure out what the solution is to some of these questions.
Well, do we want to authorize Rick to get this straightened out and to execute the contract as long as the dollar amounts and the compensation is what Reed was getting, which was the standard? How do we want to handle that?
Ooh, can I throw out a thought? Are you going anywhere for the next week?
Me?
Yeah. Like out of town?
I don't think so.
Are you going to be able to have your weekly meeting with Rick at some point? Because I
Oh, yeah.
really trust your eyes. And if you and Rick together work it out with legal counsel and then you put eyes on it,
Yeah.
Ken puts eyes on it
Every Wednesday.
at one of your meetings, the next meeting that's available, I'd be very comfortable with that.
So I guess in that case, what we could do if you want is authorize the town manager and the board chair to sign the contract if the rest of the board, and if you're not comfortable with it, it's not gonna hurt my feelings at all, so feel free to speak up. I think, my sense of this is that Steve isn't asking for anything different as far as compensation than
No.
Dick Reed was.
It comes off the same,
And
it comes
it's-
off the same
it's- that's, I'm
form.
fine with that, and
Same.
this other stuff, I think, is dotting i's and crossing t's for the most part, but I haven't had a chance to read through the whole thing, so.
I guess I would move to authorize, that the board would authorize the town manager and the board chair to review the contract and any recommended changes, and then go ahead and sign it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? And I will say that if this, what I will do as the board chair, looking at this thing, is I'll communicate with the board if I believe there are any issues.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would
then-
expect
Then
that.
we'll convene a meeting to talk about it, if there's anything that's wildly different than what the intent is. I think, I'm sensing that the intent of the board is to go into an agreement with Steve very similar to the agreement that we had with Dick Reed. And as long as what we come up with is okay with that, then I'll go ahead and execute that.
And my last 2 cents for the new board members is, now that we do not have a Jeff Parker, Ken has been my kind of go-to wordsmith. Having watched him for a while, I feel really comfortable in his ability to catch stuff that puts the town at risk.
Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Our next item is, I've just put on here, discuss library design process with the architect. And mostly what I wanted to do was, well, among the things I would like to do is, I had put out a preliminary timeline suggestion previously, and I think Steve has a copy of that, and it's in the packet. And I want to see if that's realistic, if we need to make any adjustments to that. The board had decided we wanted to push for a June vote, but if it's, personally, I don't want to push for a June vote if it means the project is going to be shorted in any way, or it's not going to succeed, or anything like that. So, I'd like to talk about that, the timeline, and then also the construction manager issue that was brought up.
Let me start off with my 2 cents worth, and Tom can too, as the board liaison to the process. First of all, I think the process has been going very well. I think Ben has been on top of a lot of these issues. I suspect that's because he went through it before, so this is sort of the second go-round for him. I think Steve is doing a very good job. I appreciate how he listens to what Ben says and his recommendations. I think they work together very well. I did ask the question at the end of a meeting today with Rick and Ben and Steve, how we were doing as far as the June timeline, and everybody right now seems to be comfortable that we're well within the envelope on that. One of my concerns about the process is the fundraising going forward. I've been talking to a few people around town about some possible people that could do our fundraising, and having some meetings and whatnot, but I do think we need to get that ramped up.
Yeah, I've had a
in
few
the near
conversations
future.
about that as well, so perhaps you and I can put our heads together and,
Good.
you know, because one of the things that was made plain to us, I think, is that arm of the project has to be involved in this part of the process, because they have to, in order for the fundraising to be successful, people have to buy into the project, and that's gonna happen with the fundraisers, or the ones who will be going out asking folks for money, being very familiar with how the project is developed and being able to answer questions for other people that will make them feel like it's a good project for the town. Regarding the timeline, the next meeting I have on here is January 22nd, which is Monday. And I put a lot of workshops on here, and we may or may not need them all, but where we don't have an ad hoc library building committee like we did before, the select board has kind of taken that on as a whole. So while we have Doug and Tom who are acting as liaisons, I do think that the whole board needs to get together periodically and for progress reports. And I'm looking to you guys to say, you know, this is too much or this is not enough or anything like that. But my first one was on the January 22nd, which is a couple weeks from tonight. Would that be a reasonable time to get together with the whole board and to tell us where we stand at that point and receive input?
Ben can give you an update as to what we've been
You
doing
need to,
over the last
Gotta,
yeah,
couple of weeks.
okay.
you guys need to go to the
Yeah.
microphone.
So it's on record.
Yeah, all,
Well,
It's in your contract, Steve.
people are watching at home. Yeah.
It's gotta be on record.
I think the 22nd would be a good time frame to get everybody together and sort of in 2-week increments. Right now, what we've got set up is sort of a library working group that's got a standing meeting every Thursday at 3:30. So Steve and I have been meeting a lot. We've got a lot of work done already, and as far as I'm concerned, I think we're ahead of the game as far as where we are with the library layout and a design. From my perspective, from sort of floors and books and chairs and desks and things. I know Steve's got a ton of work to do, and Will's got a ton of work to do, but from my perspective, we're in good shape. And I think that it's realistic at this point.
The other thing I wanted to add before Will speaks about the ongoing process is that we've been able, I think Ben and I have met four or five,
yeah.
6 times since Christmas, and I just wanted to let the board know, and obviously the people that have been involved in the process before, Dick Reed did a tremendous amount of work, and I've taken and studied all of the plans and the programming and the work that he did, and that's just accelerated the process tremendously. So I was going to personally write him a letter and thank him, but that work has not been wasted, nor the money spent getting that information. He was incredibly thorough in going through his notes and everything. It's been very beneficial. So that's been something that was a very positive move for the town anyway. You know. So
Okay.
and I think one of the next thing that Will and I have talked about, and he's going to discuss that with you, is one of our biggest concerns is the cost of the project, and so we want to move into a different arrangement, pre-construction arrangement, with the possibility of a construction manager, and he'll outline the benefit of that, because I think it's critical as we move forward now to know exactly what this project is going to cost before the voters, or before we go to the ballot box and it gets voted on. The previous budget, I think, was pretty loose. It was never clearly defined, and there was never any real costs associated with specific items. They were general budgets. So we feel it's important in order to not have a problem once the project's approved and then you go out to bid and we have a major difference in what the actual cost is from what we anticipated. So I think Will can fill us in as to what we're thinking at this point.
Okay. So we'll set that January 22nd date then as a meeting, evening meeting here, and then we can move on and decide if the schedule as needed at that point needs to be changed or amended. Okay.
Don't go too far, Steve.
Yeah, I'd say keep all those penciled in, and we'll use what we need to.
Okay.
Don't go too far, Steve.
Yeah. Just based on the schedule and what Steve was saying, I just think that for us to get a CM involved as soon as possible is going to be hugely beneficial to the project. And a CM is a construction manager, and they get involved as early as now. And they start working with the design team, and they work directly for the town. They're the town's advocate through the entire project, start to finish. Their job is to make sure that you get the project that you agreed to at the vote. And I mentioned Ledgewood, and this came from Ledgewood just because I'm working with them on a pretty sizable project for the city of Belfast. They're doing an entire new public works facility and sand and salt shed there. And we're in the process of working on that right now. So when this came up, and Steve and I started talking about this schedule and how we're going to make sure we've got this budget right, I mentioned to him that we were working with Ledgewood and that it's been a very positive and good process. And the detail that they've given us on the schematic budgets has been really impressive. And
Well,
yep.
We're assuming that these guys all know what you're talking about of construction management and the difference between a construction manager and a clerk of the works and that kind of thing.
Right. Well, that's why, yeah, so what I did is I called them, and I wasn't necessarily trying to tell you that that's who you had to hire. I just asked them if they could send me information that I could pass along so that everybody could look at it and understand what the construction manager was. And the big difference is that, again, they get on board early, they're working for you, they work with the design team to look at construction costs, materials, even site safety, site access, parking during construction, where is everything going to go, how they're going to secure the site, fencing. I mean, all the little things that, we wouldn't necessarily think of, but that's what they do. And as a construction manager, they provide pre-construction services, which is helping us get that budget right. And the way they do that is they force us to actually do a little more detail than we might normally do at this stage, but it allows them to have enough information to actually go out to bidders. So they would go to 3 or 4 earthwork contractors, go over the project with them and get those people to provide them numbers. And they would do that for all 16 divisions of a typical contract, electrical, mechanical. We wouldn't necessarily have all those systems designed right now, but what we would try to do is get a mechanical electrical engineer to think about what is the heat going to be, how much of this are we going to cool, what's the ventilation going to be, and we would have an outline of all the equipment that might need to go in there. So we're not just using square foot pricing, we're using actual pricing of what we're expecting to go into that building. We would come up with preliminary foundation plans, structural layouts, so that we could get how many pounds of steel are going to go into this framing. All of that type of stuff. And that's what they do. They help us drive that, help everybody get to the point where we can guarantee as best we can. I mean, never going to guarantee anything. That's one thing about the schedule is that if we go through all of this and say in 3 or 4 weeks we're at a point where everybody's happy with the design, we start working with the CM to put the budget together, and we find out that we're over. That's the part where I'm nervous about the schedule, because we won't have much time to adjust if we need to. The other thing that we're going to have to talk about is how long is it going to take to fundraise, and when are we really going to build this? Because if it's 1 year or 2 years out, that makes a difference, and it's awful hard to predict what those increases in construction are going to be. So we need to talk about what's the board going to be comfortable with building in for contingencies, depending on what we think that time frame is going to be. But all of those things are going to be what we're going to rely on that construction manager to help us with. And so I find it to be a huge benefit. I've worked with construction managers on about 6 projects and found every one of them to go very smooth.
So you're saying the benefits far outweigh the cost?
Well, I'm not convinced that there's an additional cost, because your general contractor is going to be charging a percentage off of every sub that is on board. What the CM does is when we get done, they're going to tell you that they're going to charge 4% period of what the project is, and then they're going to bid out every one of those subcontract items, and they'll show you those bids. You'll see 4 or 5 bids from subs, and then they'll actually go through those bids, make sure those subs didn't miss anything, which is one of the things I like about this process, because a lot of times the subcontractor that gets the job from a general is the one that missed something, right? Because he's low. The general's going to carry the low bid. He's going to get 3 or 4 subs for every item, but the low is usually going to get it. And a lot of times the low is the one that missed something, which means somebody's going to make it up somewhere. And so it avoids that process, or at least it does a much better job of avoiding that process.
So do they then act as the general contractor?
They act as the construction manager. So they're working for you, managing the project.
Right.
They have a contract to deliver the project for the price that everybody agreed on, and all of those subs work through them.
Okay, so they're managing all the subs, so you have a bunch of subs instead of a general contractor,
Yep.
Doing 50% of the work and then hiring subs to do the
Right,
rest.
so they don't self-perform the work. They have a superintendent that's on the job site every day that something's happening, and then they have their staff in the office that are doing, the billing, insurances, safety, all of that other stuff.
Okay.
The oversight group that met, that included Terry Dewan, the landscape architect from Portland. Will was there, Steve was there, Ben, Ann, Philly, myself, Tom, all met. And I think the feeling of the group was we really did need to have a construction manager. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn.
No, not at all. And part of the reason for that, and I'm sure you could talk about this a lot more than I could, is that there are specific site issues regarding the traffic flow that we really need to resolve, and that's part of the funding for this issue. It's part of what people will vote on for the bond, and we need to get this ball rolling sooner rather than later to have a really clear image of financially what we're looking at.
Will alluded to it a little bit, is if we get, too far down the road and we've come up with a plan that's too expensive and we have to go back, we don't have a lot of time to fix it.
We don't have any time.
We don't have any time.
Right. I mean, this is definitely tight. I think it's worth giving it a go. Everybody needs to know that.
Well, that's what I said early on, is I think that pushing ourselves to at least keep the June vote in play was the right decision to make, but everything does have to go fairly smoothly. If we get a hiccup along the way or something, then, we may be looking at November. I have a question on the, you sent along a fee proposal this afternoon. I don't know if the rest of the board saw that, or they came outside of the packet.
Oh, I didn't see
And there's a $5,000 cost for pre-construction services, and then a 4% cost of the work. And then it says shared savings, does not split any post-project savings with the owner, said we give everything back to you. What savings would we be talking about? I guess I'm not understanding that shared savings.
Anytime during the project, if something changes or there's adjustments that are made, then, or even just in the original budget, if it comes in under, they're not.
So their 4% is based on what's actually spent,
It's
not the
actually
budget.
spent,
Okay,
right.
that clears it up, okay.
And that's where I was going before, when I read the $5,000 figure for the upfront.
Right,
To
right.
get him going, and then 4%. So the benefits far outweigh.
Right,
think,
yeah, I mean, the 5,000, they're gonna put more than 5,000 into this pre-construction.
Yeah, the
time.
5,000 seems like a way less than I would have
I
guessed.
think they even say that. It's a
Yeah.
discounted rate so that they can get their head into it and be ready and help us guarantee that there's a project for them after the vote. I mean, for them, there's a huge incentive to be right and get this right.
This afternoon, after looking over their material, I just picked a name out of the references that they had provided with us, and I called Chief Rizzo, who's the Brunswick Police Chief. And, they built that new building there on the corner, and they used this Ledgewood firm. And he had great things to say about this company. Now I know he was listed as a reference, so I wouldn't really expect anything else. But he really felt that they saved the town money in the work that they did for them. But probably more importantly, he was really impressed with the after-project follow-up that this firm provided. I guess there were some building issues early on, maybe related to the architect, but this company came in and really helped resolve things and get things made right. So, again, glowing recommendation.
I have two questions. One is, so I'm anticipating that you want us to take some sort of motion on this tonight so you can get them integrated into the team quickly, or do we have a little bit of time? What's the timeline on getting these folks on board?
I mean, we've got a little bit of time. I mean, it's gonna probably be another week or two before we're really ready to get them doing a lot of work. But the sooner we can get them involved, the better. I mean, in the projects that I'm working on with them now, I have them involved in almost every conversation I have with the mechanical, electrical, and the architect. Just because I want them to understand how we got to the decisions we got to, and there's many times where they throw out, well, what if you did it this way?
Yeah, what about?
And
Yeah,
that's what we're looking for.
I guess if I could make a recommendation, I guess what I would suggest, because we do have a week, 10 days, and this is after talking with Steve and Rick, that I think Rick and Steve and possibly Tom should invite them up here, just sit down and talk with the company. And Steve may have some questions, you may have some questions, and if everything goes smoothly, then we can move forward pretty quickly from that.
I think that's a good idea.
I definitely think that's a good idea. I mentioned that to Rick today. I mean, it seems like this is happening fast, and I'd feel better if you met them and came
Well,
away
and then we
feeling
could-
confident.
If
You know,
you're
on
not
that-
gonna
on
be
that-
at the meeting, one more board member could also be,
Yeah.
if you're not gonna be there.
true.
I could, we could then, on that 22nd date, we could vote on it at that point.
That
And
was
have
kind of what I was alluding
That's
to.
perfect.
Make that final
Does that give
decision
you
on the
enough time?
22nd.
What's that?
Is that enough time?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah.
The concept makes all the sense in the world to me, and it sounds like, you guys had a pretty robust group that got together and talked about it, and
Yeah.
It's actually happening
I was a
more and
little
more.
skeptical until this conversation and seeing how comfortable you all were with it, and everyone seems to be nodding their head that it seems to make a lot of sense. The only second question I have is not necessarily for you all, but the 5,000 up front, is that coming out of existing?
We'll have to find it someplace. It'll come out of the building fund.
we have.
Which is kind of what I
We
was-
have some design money in the budget for library, I think, for this year,
Because the
don't we?
4%, that'll come
That'll be-
post,
that'll
that'll
be-
be
yeah,
post
that'll be
bond
in the-
stuff, but I just was curious about that initial. I know it's only 5,000, but where are we gonna get it from?
Yeah, we'd have to come up with it out of the building fund or out of the leftover money. But I would want to make sure Will's at that meeting as well. You know,
50-50.
Will kind of has two hats he's wearing, but for us, but,
I do want to mention too that we have the meeting tomorrow with DOT at the town office
Yep.
at 2:00.
to talk about the intersection improvements.
Oh, really?
Oh, good.
Yep,
Oh.
That's a big piece.
yeah,
Yes.
that is, yep, yeah.
And then last question for you gentlemen. I looked, South Portland, is that the mother office, or are we dealing with some out-of-staters that came in, just plopped down in South Portland?
That's South Portland. They've been there a
Good.
long time.
Good.
These
Okay.
guys aren't new.
But for the purposes of discussion, like the conversation we had today, when you're kicking around ideas, would they be at that kind of meeting? Would they be part of that kind of meeting as ideas are getting kicked around to have them?
You weren't at that meeting. This was
No.
just, we were talking about design concepts. I don't think they'd be there.
Okay.
We have to come up with a preliminary plan, even though it's preliminary, then they can look at the perimeter of the building and start doing general takeoffs on that.
Okay.
But we're pretty close. Within that next 10 days, we'll have enough for them to start their work.
Yeah, amazingly, they're pretty far along on a floor plan and footprint that.
Good.
When we looked at that, I was really pleased with the way that came out.
I mean, the next
We'll have that on the
step is to
22nd.
actually
Yeah.
start creating some foundation plans, so how we're gonna frame the thing, and looking at mechanical, and electrical, and everything from finishes. I mean, Steve's gonna have to, put together a list of things so that we're getting some real prices. I mean, there's definitely a lot of work to do.
Okay, well, I think we're set. We'll meet on the 22nd for a workshop, and we will have at least a brief meeting before that to approve if everybody's on the same page with the Ledgewood contract. We can take care of that on the 22nd, and then have a workshop where you guys can show us where you are on things. And
All right, and Rick, you'll coordinate with me on setting up a time
Yeah.
to get Ledgewood here?
And does it make sense? Thursdays seems to be a good time for you, Tom, Thursday afternoons?
Yeah.
Does it make sense to do it that same time?
Yeah.
And where Doug's not gonna be there, another board member could be there without messing up meeting stuff. Anybody interested in?
I could come, or if somebody else would rather. Why don't you get it set up first, and then pop
Okay.
out an email, and
Okay.
we'll see who can come.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right,
Thank you.
And because we're on the topic of the library, it's a comment/question, which I think I already know the answer to. I had heard from someone that there was some sort of feeling in some segments of town that we have not involved the library committee as much as we should have. The sense I got from the phone call that I received was, why is the library committee not a part of this? The feel that I had gotten was that the library committee was well integrated into this, that there would be at a minimum one library committee representative, probably Ann Philly, at basically every one of these meetings, if not more, And so I just wanted to
And
get,
let me say that the library committee has been invited to all the meetings that we had in December about this. The full library committee was invited. As it turned out, several members of the library committee were traveling or out of the country, so Ann came and represented the committee. But absolutely, the library committee is, I hope they're all there at the workshop on the 22nd, and I'll email Ann and make sure that they know they're invited. She has the copy of that timeline schedule, so she shared it with the committee, and
Yeah, and Anne will be at all of the meetings. She's at our standing Thursday meeting, so there is a member of the library committee at those meetings. And I mean, in the library committee, informally, members of them always stop in and check in with me about what's going on. So
but
you
we
know.
need them.
Oh,
We
tell
need them.
them, yeah.
to-
Yeah.
and my big
No.
thing was, if there was somehow perception out in town that we were not involving the library committee, if someone happens to be watching, I just wanted, because I thought that I had recalled that we had said we need to have a library
From-
committee member at every one of these meetings.
From my understanding of the impressions and the feelings that people are getting, the library committee does not feel like they are not involved.
Okay, good.
You know, they
That's important.
they feel that they are involved. They're kept abreast of what's going on. They have membership at the meetings. So I don't know if that speaks well to what you needed.
I'm very comfortable. I was just bringing up what someone had said was perception by some segment of the town. I'm
I mean, I
not
shouldn't speak for them as a whole since none of them are here, but I haven't heard anybody on the committee be like, no, we're not
Well,
being
I
involved
know
enough."
that I have specifically with
Yeah.
Ann, I have invited the entire library committee
Yes.
to all the meetings we had where the decisions were made in December, and
Yeah, and there were different
so
reasons.
they
for
know
each-
they're welcome, and,
Yeah.
and in fact, the more input, the better. Okay, next item is to consider a change to the comp time cap for public works employees, and I'll let Rick introduce that item.
This is really just purely informational to get a sense of from you guys. I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to double check. As you know, the Public Works, the union contract allows them up to 80 hours of comp time, accumulated comp time. And then it allows me to extend that to up to another 40 hours or more with my discretion. Given the conversation that we've had in the past, my sense is that the board would not be crazy about increasing that comp time ceiling at this point in time. I'm not crazy about increasing it at this point in time either, and neither is Mike, correct? Yeah, you're right. But I just wanted to bring it to you because basically if I refuse it, they're gonna wanna come to you anyways. But if you're, I wanted to get a sense from you guys whether you wanted to increase it or not. I mean, the challenge is, and without, those guys are our lifeblood, particularly this time of the year, and we really need them to be happy and out there working, and they're out there now, right? Or have they all gone home yet? They've been here since 3 in the morning and they're still going. But the challenge is that in the summertime, we end up with nobody to work because we basically. He puts us down about two people every day.
Yeah, the numbers come out, it puts us down a guy and a half a day through the summer with the whole crew if they get the 120. So basically 2 guys,
And that's a crew of how many?
10.
10.
Yeah.
So, like Rick said, they're married to this job through the winter. They don't take vacation. They don't get to go anywhere. They, like I say, still out tonight. 80 hours is fair. The guys have second jobs. Most of them are self-employed, have their own businesses through the summer, so it does help them if they can get more time. But it does hinder some help in the summer. It puts us down, but
And most of them have 4 weeks of vacation time, too.
right.
And we certainly do appreciate the job they do, especially on nights like tonight, there's no question. But again, the thing that did catch my eye, with this concept of doing some work around town this summer to beautify the town and everything, we're gonna kind of need all hands on deck for that too.
Right.
And, it's just a case of, you get paid overtime too, so, that's fair. And
Part of what you said, Rick, is most of them get 4 weeks. Everybody has been here more than 20 years, isn't it, Ben? And don't you get 5 with 20 years?
Yeah,
So
some
it's
of them
5
get
weeks,
5,
not-
some get 5, yeah.
Right.
4 of them that do.
Yep.
Yeah,
4 of them
so-
get 5, yep,
So half of them get,
yeah.
Well, I think that, they're gonna be compensated for the work they do, one way or the other.
Right.
And so they get their comp time as outlined, and they're gonna get, if they're at their cap, then, they're gonna have to be paid the time and a half overtime, so. The comp time is nice for the town because it keeps our expenditures down a bit, but it has to be a balance, because of what happens in the summer. So my sense is that I think your inclination to not extend the cap at this point is perfectly fine. If we have, tremendous winter weather over the next 3 months or something and it strains, then we may have to revisit it, but at this point, from what I understand, there's not a huge push for it, and the director's not pushing for it either, so I'm comfortable with you, keep holding the line at the 80 hours.
It's just one or two people that are requesting it?
Right.
Anybody else have any comments?
you have the okay to do that, to bring it to us, and if you say no, is there a clause in there that allows them to bring it to us? And I think that's what you said earlier.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really, but that's what they'd want to do, potentially. That's what one of them would want to do. And I just wanted to get a sense from you guys, am I on the right track? And, because my tendency is to say, at this point, we don't want to be extending it at this point.
And the contract it's Rick's
Right.
discretion. Rick doesn't have to get our permission. He can
No.
do it without our permission. I think what he wants to see what the sense of
the
the
other
board
thing
is.
too, didn't they just okay their contract? Didn't we just okay it
Yeah.
in September, or?
One of the things that they wanted, which we didn't put in there, was to move it up to the 120 already. We didn't do that. They wanted to have that language added to the contract, that it was at 120, not 80.
So,
I would say hold pat.
I think so.
And I actually spent a little bit of time trying to understand this a little, because I've heard about this. I've heard of discrepancies between here and Camden, and we do different systems. I tried to get a handle on it, all through the lens of what's the best for the humans behind all of this, and I haven't been able to get to a place to where changing it seems to make sense at this time.
The 80's fair, probably above fair of what a couple other towns have.
Yep.
Over above that is a bonus to them. But it does put us in we've got a lot to do in the summer,
Yeah.
so.
And getting more all the time.
Right, we're lining it up already.
You'll still have plenty of time to go hunting,
Okay, so I think we're through with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is to approve a quitclaim deed.
Do we actually have a motion on that, or is it just that we sign it and talked about it?
We have
publicly?
to have a motion and vote on it.
I move to approve the quitclaim deed for Joseph R. Bloniaz at 166 Beach Hill Road, map 20, lot 40, for December 5th, 2017.
It's lot 41. This is
Lot
correction
41,
motion.
my apologies.
Second. Have a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes. We do
I
not,
didn't see the fees.
No, I didn't see them either.
Isn't this like the second month in a row that we haven't had the fees?
yeah, and I asked Megan, I sent an email to Megan to ask, and perhaps you can address that. I know at one point, and this is part of the audit exit that we had, that there were some corrections that needed to be made in that wastewater commitment process. So if, Megan, if you could explain where we are with that, that would be helpful.
So, per state statute, anytime you commit fees of any sort, whether it's our tax commitment or wastewater fees, you are supposed to do a lien process within so many days of that commitment. So the way that we've been committing on a monthly basis means that we should also be going through the lien process on a monthly basis. The lien process is a very time-consuming, cumbersome process, and if you have properties that have this one set of dates for this month, and then Okay, so now it's showing up here again. It's gonna have another set of dates that it's gonna have to follow. And if they pay their commitment for this month, but they haven't paid it for this month, then it goes on to this next set of dates. So it becomes very confusing to start going through the lien process on a monthly basis. Their recommendation, I thought Ron was gonna talk about this, but their recommendation was to, at the very most, do it on a quarterly basis instead of a monthly basis.
What does that do
So-
for your revenues coming in?
We'll still get the revenues. The revenues are coming in every day, no matter what.
Okay.
But the select board is actually committing to receiving those funds, stating that we've received those funds or will be receiving those funds on that quarterly basis instead of on a monthly basis.
So will we have a commitment then next month? Because it seems like it's been 3 months since we've had one.
So if you decide to go to the quarterly basis, then we need to go back and recommit the ones that have already been committed for the first part of the fiscal year. So you'd have to recommit that first quarter, and then the second quarter, and then January would start at the beginning of the third quarter.
Okay. Well, that seems to make sense. That's the auditor's recommendation, so.
And it will make the lien process, I mean, it will still be cumbersome, but it will make it a lot less.
Well, let's do that then, and then maybe next month we can get the old quarters taken care of, and then we'll have another one, I presume, in April for the first quarter.
Right. Their billing is a month behind. So they send the bills out in March, and we don't get those until April. So it's always a month behind, but I'll get the paperwork together to do the recommitment for the first 2 quarters, and then we can get ready for the third.
Okay.
And there's no action we have to take on that? It's just you
No, it's just
changing it a
her
little bit?
presenting the commitments to
Okay.
us to sign, or to vote on, and then to sign, so we'll have those next time. Okay. Liaison reports. Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start because I have a fair amount here. First, the ambulance committee, which we talked about tonight, and again, I'll just tell you, it was sort of a frustrating experience. I'll leave it at that for now. The
Was
planning.
it slippery? Was it overly slippery and?
Well, you know,
Not gonna go there.
yeah, it's just hard to, it almost feels like a bait and switch, you know, when you're paying 79,000 one time, the next time 300,000. But again, it's a complex issue, and we can't solve it all tonight. Planning board, we did a site walk at Fuller Chevrolet, Mid-Coast Marine Electronics. Dennis York is going to be moving his business up there from down at the old CN Brown site there in the north end of Rockland. So I think that'll be a nice thing. In the end, though, the planning board decided that it was a simple change of use, so it really didn't have to go through the planning board review.
Are they purchasing the property, or? are
Yeah,
they-
yeah, they're going to purchase it.
That's
so.
awesome.
Great. That's
But it was a lot of fun walking around in the sub-zero weather.
It made for a short walk,
Yeah.
though, right?
Yes. Harbor Committee, the fees we talked about, Library Committee we talked about. Keep Rockport Beautiful, we're gonna be having a workshop on January 23rd with several of the town committees, such as Parks and Rec and Pathways, along with Mike Young from the Department of Public Works and Rick and whatnot. And our plan there is to just sort of have a roundhouse talking about defining some roles and responsibilities. You know, what are the committee's responsibilities? What's Public Works' responsibilities? Defining the channel of communications. One thing I've heard from a lot of different people is when a committee or a person has a recommendation or they'd like something to be looked at, they're really not quite sure who to talk to. Do you talk to Diane Hamilton? Do you talk to Linda? Do you talk to Rick? Do you talk to Mike? So again, I think we want to try to define that a little bit better. And then finally, we want to look at some projects that people might want to do over the coming summer and fall, and how we can allocate resources to get those done, both the human resources as well as any physical resources.
Is the Harbor Committee gonna come in next month?
No, I forgot to ask him, to be honest with you, sorry.
All right. Okay. Any other liaison reports?
Go ahead.
Let me go back though for a minute. Why don't I get in, before I leave town, I'll make sure we get in touch with Sam Temple and see
Okay.
if he can't do it.
All right.
So let me.
Yeah, just let me know on the
Yes.
You
agenda
got a
next
lot on
month.
your plate to do before you leave.
Gonna go to Doug. He's the last one.
Jesus. My wife is ready to kill me.
Not a lot. So the library committee has been meeting when I'm at work, so I haven't been able to attend those meetings, and the minutes sometimes don't come out immediately following. However, the majority of the library business that's been going on, we have certainly discussed thoroughly here in other contexts. The Opera House Committee, there's a significant amount of change going on with that committee, and I think it's probably best for me to just leave it at that at the moment. It's literally, the membership of the committee is changing, as has been reflected in some of the things that we have discussed. Some of those changes are not terribly easy, and hopefully we will be moving toward some resolution of those issues within the next few weeks. I think it's also worth mentioning, and this is for the two of us, that even though Midcoast Solid Waste is not a committee per se, there's a lot happening with regard to the transfer station. There's a lot of changes that we need to be able to anticipate. We are reviewing site plans for significant alterations in order to try to maximize the amount that we can get out on the trucks so that we can save costs that way, and that has a domino effect requiring us to look at the whole facility, and it's been very interesting and a lot of discussion happening about what to do to basically change the whole dump.
With a beautiful segue, with one of the biggest decisions that we're going to have to make going forward is single stream, which is new. You put all of your recyclables, regardless of what they are, into one pail.
New to
and then
us.
that pail is taken. Yeah, we just got color TV too. Or keeping it as source separation, which is what we have now. Single stream is great. It's an ease of managing your waste, but it does come with additional costs for.
Well, it comes with additional costs in the beginning to set it up, but the hope is that it saves us money by encouraging people to not put so many recyclables in with the waste that gets trucked away, which we pay for.
Definitely a true statement, because it'll reduce how much we send up, which has its own tipping fee.
Right.
One of the issues there is we then take ourselves out of the commodities market.
Right.
Meaning, when we do the source separation, number ones actually have a lot more value than other bits that we separate out, and you take your high value bits and you sell them into the market and you recoup some of the costs that way. When we switch to single stream, all of that stuff will then go to a facility and we'll have to do a tipping fee. It's a much lower tipping fee than we would for trash, so we realize a cost saver there. But there's pluses and minuses. That's one of the big ones that we're going to be dealing with, because it will kind of dictate, in certain senses, how we lay out the facility in this facilities reorganization. So we're kind of at an inflection point at Solid Waste to where we've contracted out with firms to go over designs and basic costs on a facilities reassessment. And so in addition to that, which we've made decisions on, there are other decisions that definitely need to be made very much in the short term, to kind of set us on a path to where this redevelopment actually makes sense. But then there's also there's other smaller day-to-day things. There's some budgetary things. We're going over the budget cycle. We have been. There's still some kind of ongoing perennial issues with certain member communities, and monies we'll get back from our relationship with MRC Perk when that relationship is dissolved, and do the municipalities, because the checks will be made out to the municipalities. We've talked about this before. And we, as a previous board, and I think that this board would probably come to the same decision, that we wanted to hold on to that money for as little time as humanly possible and get that immediately back to the Solid Waste Corporation to be rolled into the closure fund. But if certain member communities are going to hold on to that check and not give it to us, but we put our check in and it's in an interest yielding account, and that could be used for operational. So it gets a little sticky, but I think we'll be making some decisions here pretty shortly. So that's solid waste. We will be having some presentations in the not too distant future to go over some of the preliminary design options with some preliminary costs associated to them. Nothing is hard and fast, but we want to look at a range of kind of a scab option, a minor tear down, minor rebuild, or a major renovation, tear down, rebuild. We found that we can utilize or reuse a lot of the same building, but there's definitely a lot happening with that, with the Solid Waste Corporation. I did not make it to the Camden Rockport Pathways Committee meeting. I was late coming out of Augusta. I'm going back into my heavy Augusta time, so I'll be trying to make as many of these meetings as I can. If I have to choose between state and here, I will, because I'll be at the state anyway. We'll have to choose the state. So I called to some of the Pathways Committee members to see if I could get an update on anything important. And as it relates to Rockport, they're making good progress. So that's the update from the Pathways Committee. They're making good progress, but there have been some good advances in the Camden aspect of what that committee does. And I have been absolutely horrible in getting together with the Recreation Committee, but I did send out an email today with my availability to meet with them. Suzanne Jondo has really wanted to meet with me and the committee to iron out, I think, a lot of the same details that Doug was just alluding to. The lack of communication, who do we talk to? Why are we having a committee if we don't feel our work is moving forward in a meaningful way? So yeah, that's my report.
Mark, anything?
Other than setting in with you once on the ORC, I popped in and with Doug at the ambulance. Nothing of great news to
Yeah, the
report.
ORC is into the throes of their season.
Are you on the ORC or?
No, he just happened to be there.
Oh, no, because I told him I thought he was.
He couldn't stay away.
No.
No. that's-
Who's the other person on?
No, there's just only
Oh,
one.
there's just you.
me.
Oh,
And the ORC is making progress. We're going through things. We're actually identifying, last meeting had to do with looking at residential density requirements in town, and some of that conversation is probably going to morph over to the comprehensive plan committee to make some decisions on if they want to make any changes, particularly for areas where there's sewer already, because then the density can become a little bit higher without an adverse environmental impact. So we found a few mistakes in the charts. We're correcting those, but the season is moving along well. We've already accomplished a fair amount. Legacy Rockport will be meeting a week from today in the town office, even though it's a holiday. So we'll have a meeting with that group, and they're working with, hopefully getting the Simonton Corner project reinvigorated, and those folks who really want to rehab that place, they've got some new energy there, so they're working on that. Legacy Rockport would act as a pass-through for any monies that they're able to raise, because Legacy Rockport has the 501c3 designation. Cemetery will meet soon. I got an email from Linda today with some possible meeting times, and I think we'll get
Just
that.
waiting for the board to
Yeah.
confirm what the dates.
Yeah, we'll get that meeting set soon. Am I forgetting anything else?
How much longer do we have on that moratorium?
ZBA has not met. That's probably, may have already expired. We have to look at that. But the cemetery committee hasn't met for a long while, so we'll have quite a bit to do on that.
One thing, Mark, about the ambulance committee, I think your input's going to be very valuable, because just like, fire coverage, police coverage, ambulance coverage, understanding what a community needs and what a community wants, and how do you reconcile the differences between the needs and the wants. You certainly have some frontline experience with all of that. So again, I hope that your input will be valuable to them.
And that's a workshop?
Well, it's that.
The ambulance
yeah, the
committee?
ambulance committee.
The ambulance
The
committee
Ambulance
that we go
review
to.
committee.
You're,
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause that one does have two members, and you're the.
Yeah, there's two members.
well, yeah,
on
no, that one, but the one coming up next, was it?
Oh,
ambulance?
the
Thursday.
11th, is it a workshop or a meeting for the ambulance committee?
It's a meeting, because it's going to be live stream.
Yeah.
All right.
It's going to be here, it's 5:30.
Decisions will be made, Mark.
Well, I don't know if that's gonna happen, but it.
Voting will
it-
take
the-
Well,
It
it's
should
some
be
more
the
discussion
motto
will
of this group.
take place.
Decisions are now being made.
Well, I found, speaking from my time on the ambulance review committee, because I was on it for, Jeff and I were on it together for a few years, and I learned a lot, I gotta tell you. And I sense from your discussion that you're learning a lot too.
No, I mean, really, it's fascinating.
It is
and
fascinating, and the
yeah.
interesting thing about it is that there is no statutory requirement for towns to provide
Yeah.
emergency medical service.
Yeah, yeah.
But I would not for a minute suggest that we do that. I think there's a moral requirement that we have to provide that
I
service
think it
for
will
our
be,
citizens.
it will be difficult for another organization to come in and provide us with, even if you said the same service we're getting now, for the level of
Yeah.
fees that will be charged.
Yeah.
You know, that's the downside, but we have to be careful about, you know, we were very eager to take the $24,000 figure and say, hey, that looks pretty good.
Well, I mean, to their credit, I mean, they base that on a certain call volume, like we learned. It's all call volume generated. And their presentation said if the call volume had stayed level over the last 5 years, we wouldn't be having the
And-
conversation.
And if there's any type of negotiations done or any contracts, then maybe there's a tipping point.
Yes, you had mentioned that in a conversation you and I had, and I think that might be something to talk about. Is let's tie this to call volume, and you know, yes, we'll have to take on a little bit of the risk, but then they're a for-profit company, so they'll have to take on some risk that they
More-
might not make as
more
much.
of a
If they
partnership.
have a whole bunch of calls come in and they all of a sudden they have a lot more revenue, well then that's going to be a break in our subsidy. But it'd be interesting to see how that conversation could go,
Yep.
because I think that's a conversation worth having. Anything else?
Move
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Second?
All in favor? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Productive meeting.
Good question. Not as long as I thought.
No. Check this real quick.